controversial, and I think we'd be silly not to do it. So I hope you can support.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers to that? Right. Okay, we will vote on this capital new motion around Acres purchasing the Esplanade strip there at Acres Road. If you could vote, please. That has passed 16 votes for, none against. Thank you. All right, moving through to operating programs. Is around that council add 46,000 to the annual budget for 26-27 for a soft plastics trial in 26-27, noting that the expected revenue of approximately 15,000. That's moved by Councillor Bowen, second by Councillor Johnson. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In a similar vein, this is another recommendation that comes via a committee decision. There was a paper to Community Resilience and Sustainability on the 18th of April, which set out options for the soft plastics trial that officers had been working through, and that went through with good numbers in support, but one of the recommendations required an operational programme to be referred to the annual budget because the option for a 12-month trial requires operational expenditure. I've got the list here for collections, materials, handling, baling, transport and processing fees of the soft plastics, marketing launch of the trial and consumables. That's estimated at $43,000 a year in the papers. It's 46,000 here now. I suppose that's to do with the fuel costs we heard about yesterday, and will be offset by revenue received from the soft plastic scheme, which is estimated to be $15,000. So that's in order to get this trial up and running, which was well supported in committee. We need this operating programme to come through the annual budget. Ask for your support for it.
Thank you, Councillor. Look, it's something that I've been banging on for quite a while. I think we're possibly the last city to do this, so to me it is something that we should be doing. If you think about what you do in your own household, probably imagine a company or a retail outlet and the amount of plastic that still is going into the waste stream. So we should be doing this. It's just what is the gap in revenue, and no, it's approximately 30 grand. So I'm hoping that gap will come down as we get a bit of scale and a bit of volume, and who knows, maybe a couple of our smaller councils join in with us as well. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to say it was a little bit earlier than April that the decision was made. It was in the February committee, and then it was confirmed by council. Also that there is a community expectation that this is going ahead now, so there's been significant publicity about it, and I think people would be very surprised if we weren't going to agree to the budget to do it, having voted unanimously to put it forward at committee and at council. So I do hope you'll continue to support it.
All right. There being no other speakers, you don't need to write a reply. We will vote. That's passed 16 votes for, none against. Move through to N now. And this is around the council adding 82,000 to the annual budget of 26-27 for the City Bus Centre waiting lounge, noting noting partial offset via partner co-funding. Now, Councillor Barrett, and seconded by Councillor Johnson. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Colleagues, this does build on yesterday's debate around the capital side of this, and my apologies yesterday. It could have been more clearly stated in that recommendation, so apologies to staff for making that probably more complex than it needed to be, and Councillor Meehan and others, because it wasn't trying to obfuscate yesterday around the 200K, but to be very clear, there is a partial offset here, and actually when you look at this, we're doing pretty well. So it's a bit like a case where you're the lead tenant going flatting, and there's 3 other flatmates. It turns out that we've done a very good job with the flatmates, because the net that we are left with out of 82K is less than $11,000. So the cost to our ratepayers is $10,700, and $71,000 is being picked up by the other 3 flatmates. So well done us. Please do vote in support.
Very good, councillor. I think we might have the smallest room in the House. But seriously, again, like yesterday, this is the second part to that. And again, it's a good deal for the city. If we were to do this by ourselves, it would be considerably more. So to have NZTA, to have Horizons, and to have transit funding the driver's room, which probably is the smallest room in the flat, is a good deal. So I hope you can support it. There's no other speakers, no need to reply, so we will vote, please. That is passed 11 votes for and 5 against. Right, moving on to O. And this is around, and this is part from sections 263, 265. The council had $15,000 to the annual budget 26-27 to advance the city's Heritage Festival, with 50% to come from external funding. That's moved by Councillor Bowen, seconded by myself. Through to you, Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Colleagues, you'll be aware that this suggestion came through in submissions led out primarily from the Heritage Reference Group, but with others in support, and really reflects the ongoing and building success of the city's Heritage Festival, which has been led out of our library and within their existing budgets. And they have done, I think, general agreement, done a fantastic job of building that programme. So this year we had a month-long programme where there was actually more than I think any one of us could get to, but I know that lots of you did attend particular elements of that. When I asked officers about how we might advance community aspirations for seeing this festival develop, there was some comment came back, I think it's in tranche 2 of questions if people wanted to go and have a look, about saying there's probably like a 3-year build here, that we could put an additional budget line in would give us transparency and visibility through our own processes, and with that an opportunity to seek external funding. Council's fundraiser-in-chief, who we also call the Mayor, is very confident that he can find some external funding towards this. But bearing in mind this is just an annual budget debate, I've put forward a programme for 1 year to see proof of concept here, to see if we put in a bit of extra money, can we attract external funding towards it? I think we can, and I think that's good value. I'd refer you to another submission, which was 287, just to start us in a positive way this morning, which said, may the PNCC continue on its enlightened and positive way towards arts, culture and heritage, and recognise its economic and cultural significance, which is well internationally and nationally proven. So that's from the submissions. I think we don't actually need that international and nationally proven to know that in our community, the Heritage Festival has found a place where we heard from submitters that they bring visitors into the city to come to some of those events, that we could do more to market that and increase the economic impact of it. That's a benefit to me, but it's not the point of it. The point is that we understand our own history so that we don't repeat some of the bad bits of it. And I'd ask for your support as we test this proposition.
Thanks, Councillor. Look, this gives this festival, which is really starting to gain momentum, some sustainability. I've been to a couple in Wanganui, in Wellington, and there's one in Hawke's Bay, which actually even has some awards linked to it with their Art Deco, strong Art Deco themes there. There's a real opportunity to get some some philanthropic, some external money here. If you think about architects, developers, people that benefit from some heritage, and also suppliers, paint companies, scaffolders, all sorts of builders, those sorts of people. So I do think there is people in our city that would, with a little bit of tapping, would come up with some money, and possibly even more than the 50%. But let's get this into a program line. It gives some confidence to the library team who do a great job of pulling this all together. And I'd have to say our just most recently finished Heritage Festival was probably the best that I can recall. So well done to the team there. This gives it some sustainability, so I hope you can support it. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a clarifying question, if I may, to the mover. Just double checking, do you mean 15 grand that we'd put in 7.5 and we'd find 7.5, or do we mean that we'd look for another 15 on top?
The intention is that we would find a flatmate, to use the analogy of the day. Yeah, 15,000 total budget, seeking to get half of that externally.
Excellent, thank you.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, sir. Just quickly, I just wanted to say, congratulations to the library team and Linda for a really successful festival. Basically, I went to quite a few, and it was amazing to see the support out there. While I understand we need discipline in this budget, this is exactly the sort of investment council should continue to support. It brings people into the city that spend money, and it's not a large ticket item, but it talks about our history, our city's history, and the stories. So that's important to keep that going. So certainly support this. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I very much support this, and I think our ability to do heritage well is becoming one of our unique selling points as a city, to be perfectly honest. And it's attracting people in from outside the city. And so I think that although heritage is valuable in itself, and the Heritage Festival, is valuable locally, I think there's a lot of potential in this festival to become like a major event, and to bring people in from outside the city and to add to the city's vibrancy and economic development as well. And there was a very good submission, I thought, from the New Zealand Society of Genealogists Palmerston North Branch, who said, talking about heritage and the library and so on, it is these aspects of a city and community that add to the quality of life of its members as much as clean water and safe roads. It is these aspects which promote and celebrate history, heritage and community, which are the glue in a city culture and its shared sense of relationship. And I thought that was very nicely put, so well done to them.
Okay. No other speakers, no right of reply, we'll vote. That's passed 15 votes for and 1 against. Right. Through to P, and this is where Council reduced program 2559, Massey University, Te Waimana o Turitea Botanical Gardens operational support. Councillor Isabella.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. This program to me, is one of the ones that's becoming harder to justify as we're making these difficult decisions about our priorities. I wanted to remind colleagues that this project is a very cool 7-phase project by the Massey Foundation, which I personally really love, and we agreed to contribute $150,000 over 3 years for the phase 1, the filtration zone part of that project. But the reasons why I think we could reduce this contribution this year is that, to my mind, it doesn't address a pressing need, and that the organisation does have access to other funding options. And we get so many requests from groups who are working really hard to fundraise for their aspirations in a really constrained funding environment, and they have really limited options. But this particular foundation generated $14 million in revenue last year and has an equity position of $84 million. So to me, that doesn't demonstrate a clear financial need compared to other requests that we get from the community. So I think our $50,000 is not as imperative to the success or failure of this project as it might be for other organisations that come to us asking for support. And we have by now already made a $50,000 contribution to Zone 1 project, and that is still a significant sum of money for our ratepayers to contribute. I think not proceeding with a further $50,000 this year is a trade-off that we could feasibly make without widespread impacts to the wider community. So I'd ask you to consider that. Thank you.
Councillor Harpiter.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just a question to the mover. Do you think there'll be a fallout to Massey with us doing this?
Well, I'd separate Massey University from the foundation, as I understand they're separate entities. I would hope not, considering we still have a $50,000 contribution scheduled for the following financial year, and I would hope that the strength of our relationships don't live or die on the strength of a $50,000 contribution to a stage 1 of a project. I would hope that we had stronger bonds in place than that.
Okay, I think I'll comment. I think I won't support this because I think we're starting to get into a point where we are getting a little bit too... Well, we're looking for things to cut, and I don't want to cut things. And the mover has said she doesn't think it'll affect the relationship with Massey, but if it did affect the relationship with Massey over something that we've actually had for many years, then I would think that would be a disaster for us. So for me, I won't support it because of that, because I think the relationship with Massey is more important. So that's why I won't support it.
Colleagues, I won't either. I mean, I'm big on partnerships, and so's the new Vice-Chancellor. I think this will have an effect. Just be careful, colleagues. We don't want to wake up and then find the registries moved to Albany because they've been shown a bit more love. No, seriously, we have to be careful. Please, people don't snigger. It's true. So this is a partnership. Can I just tell you what the foundation's done and remember what it's benefited for the city? So the Sir Geoffrey Perrin building was upgraded and pulled back to its former glory. The old refectory, which of course we supported as well, and we've utilised many times. Scholarships, significant in the agri, hort and food side. I just think we've got to be a little bit careful with, if it was hundreds of thousands of dollars, yes, I think there probably would be a call to pull back on something. But there's other partners too, Rangitane or Manawatu, in the filtration part of the garden. So on a week where the university's celebrating thousands of graduates, literally 50 metres away, I just think timing's everything, and I'm worried that, you know, we've killed off one program, we kill off another, there starts to be a bit of a pattern developing. So again, it's a partnership. Anything new is fair game, but this is something that we've committed to. The foundation is coming to see the CE and myself in the next couple of weeks, so I'd like it to be a pleasant meeting rather than a Dear John meeting. Anyway, we'll leave it at that. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I tend to agree that the value of this programme isn't necessarily in the dollars, it's in the civic partnership that we get to express through that. And so I'd like to move an amendment that the operational support be reduced to $30,000 for this year rather than the zero that's there, please.
I'd second it.
Thank you. And colleagues, seek your support for that, demonstrating that we've listened to submissions, looking at the questions around this project and the value more generally to our community, but also seeing that there is a general value for us as council. Thank you.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 2 points just I wanted to reflect on. Back in 1897, the government vested a piece of land that we planted the very first tree in, which is now celebrated as the Palmerston North Esplanade. And a bit like Massey's vision, which is for a better future, they're going to be planting the first tree in a project that will actually become quite a significant feature of our region and draw in people. So this better future focus is something that I think will be a milestone for our city when we look back on it for our ones to come. The other thing is this is part of an existing partnership that Massey founded its college back in 1927, almost 100 years ago, and this project, the first stage of it at least, signifies the 100-year centenary of the university campus at Turitea. And so again, I think that has significance. And if we're not part of the first year of that sort of project, I just think we're missing in action. And I don't think it's a good look for the others that that are now vesting in, that have done well, got their scholarships and their honours, whatever, through the University of Massey, and now vesting back into our city. And many of them are long gone from the boundaries of Palmerston North, but still invest into the campus, give scholarships to students, give upgrade projects to the refectory, and I think it's just incredible. And so when you look at a key relationship, that Massey University is a cornerstone to our city. It's a cornerstone to our economy. It's a key feature of the town-gown relationship of a lot of people's association with the city. And so I just think this is, to not be part of it, I think it just sings all the wrong songs. And if we're going to give something, I'd support Councillor Bowen's approach. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
I don't support 30,000, and I don't support 50,000 either, to be perfectly honest. I think we've just got to take a look at the bigger picture here, where we are reducing our own provision of services and programmes, deferring a significant amount of work because of our need, I suppose, to keep rates within a certain band, and because of requests from the community to keep rates within a certain band. And in that context, I find it hard to prioritise money for this particular project. There are other things that I think we could prioritise money for, but this particular project, as the mover said, it's going to succeed with or without this particular money. We've already given them 50,000 to it. I think that that's enough, quite honestly, although there is another 50,000 scheduled for next year. So in terms of partnerships and what effect it would have, just remind you that Massey quite happily cut some of the partnership funding that they had with us. And we ended up having to pick up a lot of the support for Summer Shakespeare, and the Artist in Residence programme was just gone. So there were other things as well, but I'm not going to go through a list. So the point is that partnership cuts both ways, and Massey has certainly had to, at times, when they've been going through hard times financially, needed to make some hard decisions. And I think we need to make the hard decision today that this isn't a priority for us this year. It's not to say it might not be different next year, but it's not a priority at the moment. And so I won't be supporting it at 50,000 or at 30,000.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I completely agree with what Councillor Johnson just said, so I won't repeat it. But other than to add that we have already just added 135,000 into the budget, and we can't just keep adding things in and not considering where we can take things out. This was a program that was specifically identified by quite a number of submitters, and I tend to agree with them. I think if the strength of our partnership is such that it's going to be rocked by one contribution in a year that we're doing it because our community are saying that things are tough for them, then I think we've got to perhaps look at the basis of that partnership. So I won't support the amendment, but I will support the substantive.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, colleagues. It's interesting to see what issues kind of draw us to the center of the debate in terms of value or not, and sometimes the quantum that's associated with them is remarkably small. And this is certainly one of those cases. And interesting to hear the various impassioned views on all sides of the issue. For me, there is a couple things about this. One is I think that it needs to be very clear that this is a asset that would be available to the city should it come to fruition. And I'm reflected that just yesterday we were really excited about Farnham Park and the fact that there was a partner there that wanted to do some of the building with us. To me, this looks and feels a bit the same. We would only ever be a very small part of the funding puzzle around this, but again, a great asset could be created for the wider community. So I think there's real value in it there. And yes, we have had a number of comments around affordability and concerns around affordability, around rating, and concerns about the level of rates. But also just yesterday, there was quite a bit of commentary about the balance that was actually in the submissions. And when you look at the submissions, yes, about half are wanting to see less. And yes, there's also about half that are quite comfortable with where things sat. So in this project, I'm quite happy to sit with the group that's comfortable with where things are, which would be to continue to sustain some funding. I think that dropping from 50 to 30 is actually a reasonable recognition for those groups that are concerned about the level of rates by dialing this back a bit, but keeping the active conversation and partnership going on this project for the benefit of the whole community with Massey makes great sense.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you. Just quickly, 50,000 is a lot of money. It's almost 14 households' rates for an entire year in the city. And I would encourage everyone to look at every piece of spending in that way. How many households' rates for a year is this? Obviously, I won't support the amendment, and I'll support reducing it to zero, given I'm seconding the motion. Massey have their own governance models and their own structures, and they can fund their own assets. They get fee-paying students, both internationally and domestically, and have plenty of their own money to fund these sorts of things. Thank you.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, sir. Just quickly, look, I certainly value Massey University, as I'm sure we all do in this in the city, and you know, they're a fantastic friend. Now, I struggle to support this, and I won't. And you know, the next decision we're about to make is about a road that there's been deaths on, and you know, this decision here is a bit of a want, isn't it? I see the other one as being a bit of a need, so that's my focus. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
I agree with Councillor Arnott with the context that we're facing. There's far more important things to spend money on. A bougie boardwalk for Massey students is very different to playgrounds for children at Farnham Park funded out of existing budgets. So I don't agree with the comparison made there. I think this is an entity that made a net profit of $9 million last year, asking the ratepayers to stomach 50 grand. So in my opinion, 20 grand of a reduction wouldn't be far enough. I mean, it'd be nothing if it was to get across the line, but my strong urge to you councillors, vote down the amendment and support the original. They don't need the support. We've already given them 50 grand. That's more than enough, in my view.
Right, a reply, Councillor? No. Okay, we're going to put it to the vote. So we're just putting the amendment to the vote, please. And that has failed. 7 votes for and 9 against. All right, we'll go back to the substantive. Do you want to speak to that anymore? You do? Okay. Councillor Ballin.
Thank you, and thank you, colleagues, for the debate. I think it always is good to test value on these types of things. I definitely don't deny the importance of the foundation or the good works that they have done, but I do find that there is a lot of hyperbole in the talk around these types of matters, where if we do anything to the foundation or anything cautious towards Massey, then the entire university will pick up and move out of the city, and that it will be a disaster. Over the matter of $50,000, I think is just exaggeration and unhelpful. We have contributed $50,000 already. We have been part of this project. But to me, it comes down to, does it present or address a pressing need? No, it doesn't. Do they have access to other funds? Yes, they do. Have we contributed already? Yes, we have. I think I agree with some of the comments that my other colleagues have made, that when it comes to other items that we are adding to this budget, this is one that we could feasibly reduce without widespread impacts to the community.
All right. No other speakers, will vote. That is passed, 11 votes for and 5 against. All right, move to Q, which is around council adding 80,000 to annual budget 26-27 safety improvements to Kairinga Bunnythorpe Road near Bunnythorpe. That's in submission 245 and accompanying petition. Councillor Sabellin.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I did speak to this yesterday, so I won't speak too long on this, only to make the point that the $80,000 here is on the recommendation of officers that we would need to do some planning before we could move forward with budgeting or prioritising what type of larger interventions we would need to put in this area other than signs and rumble strips. And I just wanted to note as well that the wording here is quite open as to the location, because the points made in the submitters in their submission at the hearing was that it's not just Kairinga Bunnythorpe Road, it's those roads that are on the approach to it. So I wanted to just keep it open so that the officers could be flexible about where they put those interventions. But my comments from yesterday stand. I hope you can support. Thanks.
Okay, no other speakers. We will vote. It's passed, 16 votes for, none against. Okay, we move through to number R. And this is in recognition of increased demand. Council approved 25,000 funding in the financial year 26-27 to the MASH Trust for the Luck venue to support adequate service provision for vulnerable people. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is in response to the submission from MASH Trust, who are running the Luck venue. And basically what they told us is that they have had a 31% increase in meal requests this year, that they are serving 890 of the most vulnerable people in our community, those who are experiencing homelessness, housing insecurity, mental health challenges and social isolation. And basically these people are tending to fall between the gaps and have barriers to accessing support. Luck is needing to basically run on the sniff of an oily rag as it is, and with the increased demand, it's become increasingly difficult for them to be able to continue. Now, they had, MASH Trust had a lot of, they had a number of other asks in their submission, which would have been quite a lot more money. I'm not advancing those at this stage because I think they're a more suitable discussion for the long-term plan. But I do think, given the significant increase in demand that they've experienced over the last year, that we could look to increase their grant for 1 year to help them through that. When there's cost of living issues, they fall most heavily on the most vulnerable people in their community. And Luck are doing a tremendous job with very little resourcing. I did just check to see what resourcing they had from us in previous years. From 2022 to 2025, they had $60,000 a year in strategic priority grant, and from 2025 to 2028, they're receiving $55,000 a year in strategic priority grant. So not only has their grant not kept up with just even CPI, it certainly hasn't kept up with the increase in demand that they're experiencing. So I would ask you to consider this seriously. I have not put a lot of asks up into this budget in recognition of difficult times that people are experiencing. But I do think, as Councillor Naylor reminded us yesterday, that a community is judged on how it treats its most vulnerable people, and these are our most vulnerable people, so I'd ask for your support.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was really pleased to second Councillor Johnson's motion, and she's spoken to it very eloquently. A few of us visited the Look venue last year, and it's truly confronting to see that kind of poverty in our city. And food poverty, cuts to the bone of how people's resilience and their ability to cope with life. And I don't think this is a request that's just coming from MASH for their vulnerable people. I think when we look across the submissions, I think particularly about the discussion about the bus station and the lounge, as we were talking about yesterday, there's a real concern in our city that people don't have places to go, and that that impacts negatively on the perception of the central city. Our business community are keen to talk to us about the implications of that for them. The Look facility absolutely provides meals for people, and that's the request that we're looking at here, but it provides a place of shelter through the day for people who don't have anywhere else to go. And without this facility, they would be in doorways of our businesses around the central city, and I don't think that's something any of us want to see. We want to see people in safe, dry, warm places where we can provide that support. So I think this is a very measured and appropriate response to a very, very real need in our city, and I ask for your support.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was also really compelled by the presentation from the Luck venue, and they certainly do look after some of the most vulnerable in our city. When it comes to this budget, obviously being consistent, I'm also mindful of how that's funded. So I would support this recommendation with an amendment that I'd like to move, that additional 25,000 be funded through a reduction in program 2448 and 2525, which is the Manawatu Jets sponsorship and the Central District's Hines sponsorship. Now, in times where there are vulnerable that need support in our community, I think we need to think about how we fund that in a way that's not going to negatively impact on those who are funding it. I think sponsorship to sports teams is very much in the optional or nice to have area. So there's 22,000 allocated to the Jets, and there's 21,000 allocated to the Central District Hines. So my thinking would be...
Sorry, Councillor, have you got a seconder for that?
Yeah, Councillor Fitzgerald. So my thinking would be to get 12,000 off each of those programs in order to fund this. So I move that as a pragmatic way to be enable us to support this. I'm also, I'll leave it there, thank you.
Okay, does anybody want to speak to the amendment? Councillor Finlay.
I won't support this amendment. I will support the initial recommendation. We have a larger growing population of people that are depending on MASH in the city. If MASH got to the situation where they couldn't handle what they're doing, where would those people get their food from? Have you thought that through? The choices are very limited. There's always five-finger shopping, but we have a major problem with that already in the city. Let's not encourage it even more. MASH opens their doors in the morning for people who have slept outside, slept in cars, slept on people's couches, or slept in places you wouldn't imagine, so they can get a warm breakfast. They are having trouble surviving. We have restaurants, flash restaurants in this town, closing down everywhere because they can't afford to purchase their stock anymore. It's got too high. What about MASH? Their prices are going sky high as well. They get a lot of donations, yes, but they have to buy their product to feed the hungry. $25,000, I think, is hardly enough, but it's a start. And to cut it back, to me, is not being frugal. I think it's been mean. It's just been mean. And I don't think we should be mean to people who are out there on the street, sometimes starving, sometimes sitting outside the door waiting to get in, to get something hot into their stomach. If you've ever felt that situation, if you've ever been in that situation, you'll know how it feels, but I doubt if many people in this room ever have.
Colleagues will speak to both. So look, I won't support the amendment. I just feel like we're into a bit of a Dutch auction here. And I've been to the Luck venue, as some of you have, and I encourage those that haven't to have a look, just recently actually, and it was great to see the work that they're doing, but I think Councillor Johnson and Councillor Finlay have really framed it up quite well. There's food producers in our city which are helping. There's some philanthropic donors, in fact some that underpin some of the sports teams that the amendment seeks to cut, who are giving to the Luck venue. And there's some sponsorship from some organisations as well, again, that fund some of the other sports teams that we're looking to cut. And I think this is quite a small price for the city to be a partner in, so I encourage you to vote down the amendment, but vote for the substantive. Councillor Denison.
Mr. Mayor, can I have a couple of questions just before I might opt to speak? Can I understand that the Luck venue already get a strategic priority grant, so it's not like we're not supporting them in this space? Can I understand the value? And how much was it?
Sorry, I don't know if the staff here can answer. Oh, there is, Amy's here. I did check the figures with staff and I did say them in my original speech, Councillor, but we'll let staff members speak.
Amy.
Morena koutou, Amy Viles, Acting Manager, Community Development. Yes, we fund Luck venue in this round of the Strategic Priority Grant, $55,000 for a range of their activities.
Yes, and can I say, over and above that, because we're talking about rough sleepers, have we also got an outreach program funding MASH in partnership with MSD for an outreach officer that's helping assist people with housing?
Yes, that's correct. We there's three prongs to that housing security pilot. One of those is the outreach program. So we fund an outreach role. MSD currently fund two, but I believe that funding's due to come to an end.
Okay, but our funding's quite recent, is it?
Our funding is for 3 years.
Yep, and that
so
started in 2025.
Yeah, so we're most of the way through that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for those responses. So, first off, I'm not for the Dutch auction, trading it off. We spoke about one of the recommendations that come forward yesterday, and we suggested that it's best to be split and treat them as separate recommendations rather than tag team them. For starters, I'm not going to support this. I didn't support it yesterday, so I think they're two separate issues. So I'm going to oppose the amendment. Speaking back to the additional grant for MASH Trust, let's be clear, sure, they got $60,000 for the year 22 to 25, and now 55 for the year 25 to 28. It's not as if we haven't granted them anything. This is also alongside an additional $100,000 for a specific role for that period as an outreach officer for helping those rough sleeping that we talked about and pathwaying them into suitable housing and secure housing outcomes. So we have given them more over this period, quite a bit more. If I see a little bit of Pandora's box here, opening it up, giving this group another 25 outside the strategic priority grants, when there's other groups that got funding, and I'm only presuming some of them are like just Zilch, and other community agencies, Te Aroha Noa. I don't want to go through, I'm not that familiar right at the minute. But how fair is it for them to come back and actually ask again if we give one that come through the submissions for an extra ask to get some more in other directions? I see this as still a social development issue around the government agencies giving direct support and support with housing and with food and with other special grants. And I don't see it as the councils necessarily when we're already giving 155,000, which was increased from the 60 we gave for the previous period. So that would be my stance. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Colleagues, like Councillor Dennison, actually not at all attracted, let's say, to the amendment. We managed yesterday to get out of the rut when we were trying to trade one off against another at quite random assemblages, and to fall back into that rut today is disappointing. I mean, why would we pick on, you know, 2 codes out of sport when there's dozens of them? It's just, you know, there's very little sense to me in terms of how we end up making these pairings of things we want to cut so that we can somehow internally justify a choice to look after the most vulnerable in our community. So definitely not a fan of the amendment. Is there a need and is there a value in funding the 25K? I'd also acknowledge that, you know, Councillor Dennison's absolutely right that we have funded some other activities, and I would point out that the increased demand is in the background of those activities already being funded. If they were sufficient, I wouldn't be here supporting this. They are not. It's demonstrable. There's a gap. So we could sit here and say, well, somebody else should fund that gap, or something else should happen, or magic or fairy wands or whatever. But the reality is, if we want to address the need that presents every single morning in this community, we do it right here, and we do it by voting yes to support a very modest contribution. There was a $150,000 gap identified in questioning in the submissions, and I mean, yes, we could have rocked up with 150 and said, let's actually meet the whole gap. This is a modest demonstration, and I think one that hopefully we can use to encourage other philanthropic investment locally to fully meet that gap. But, you know, please, at the least, see that we can support this so that we are looking after the most vulnerable in our community. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an interesting one. I do disagree with some of my colleagues on the principle of the amendment, and we spoke about it in other ways about regard to the long-term plan of would you sell something to get something. And although I agree that they are different mechanisms, I don't actually have a problem with the concept of do we decrease something in one area to get something in another area. I think that's a perfectly appropriate thing for councillors to discuss, and I'm perfectly happy if some councillors aren't comfortable with that, but I think it's allowed. I think it's an interesting way of doing things. If the councillors just put up randomly an amendment to reduce these sponsorships with no context as to why they'd do it, and then that didn't get across the line and didn't support this later, it would be hard to draw a through line. So now personally I won't vote for the amendment because I don't agree it's the right place for it to come from, but I don't have an issue with there being a trade-off. I think that is an interesting way of doing things, and it justifies doing something to the community. If you were going to decrease something, here's why we've done it and what we've done it for, rather than just going, we've just done this in isolation. So I'm not hugely uncomfortable with the concept, clearly. On the substantive, however, I have supported previously, I recall in this chamber maybe 2 or 3 years ago, the lifeguards came to us from Foxton or Himotani and said, look, we've got a shortfall, can you bridge us through and help us out? And we supported that, and I believe I supported that at the time. There has been a 31% jump in demand for the service this year. That is the unusual circumstance we find ourselves in. I don't think it's good principle. I agree with Councillor Dennison to just bring things into the chamber and start that as we do it all the time. And certainly if we found ourselves in a position with 10 recommendations for any organisation that had come to us and made a submission and asked for money, I would be very uncomfortable with that. I think there are extenuating circumstances. In this case, they have to do their SPG application a year out, and so they weren't able to anticipate this jump in demand for their service. Now, it's not saying I'll support this every year going forward. I mean, when this budget is approved, there will have been a cumulative 44% increase in the last 3 years to the strategic priority grants, taking into account inflation, 10% every year plus inflation. So there has been a significant jump in the funding we provide the community, and I would hope that going forward, given the demonstrable need of this service, we would be able to find it, and our officers would be able to find it within our existing budgets. But given the extenuating circumstance, I'm very happy to provide this bridging support this year, and then we'll see where we get to in the long-term plan. But wouldn't want to set this up as a crutch forever, but I think that there is demonstrable need for it this year in particular, so I will support it.
Councillor Zabellan.
Thank you. I do actually agree with Councillor Wood that I think this is an interesting way of testing the value of items rather than taking each one on its own merits in isolation. And I do a lot of comparisons in my comments often, and I try to highlight that the Homelessness Support Fund versus Home for Football in the long-term plan, for example, and this I think is a formalised way of doing that, so I'm not so opposed to it. But I just wanted to address the levels of funding received by MASH through the SPG, of which Luck Venue is one of the services that funding goes to, but not the entirety of it. And particularly in response to some of the comments that Councillor Dennison made, that the Homelessness Response Fund in the LTP launched that particular program that we were talking about, and MASH were awarded the contract after a competitive application process. So I don't see that as us giving them the funding. We awarded them a contract to deliver our program, and I think we shouldn't conflate those two things as the sum total of how much we're giving them to deliver their services. They're two quite separate things, in my opinion. Thanks.
Councillor Harpiter.
Thank you. Without repeating what everybody else has said, I just want to say I do agree with what Councillor Barrett has said. I think that I do not agree with the amendment. I think we shouldn't be taking away sponsorship from teams that we've already committed to and said that we would sponsor, so I don't agree with doing that. So that's the amendment I won't support. But for the substantive, I think they came to us and said there is a need this year, and because they're crying out and they have got a need. So I will support the substantive because they said there was a need. And I think Councillor Johnson and Councillor Barrett have brought this to us because of that, and that's why I will support that, and that's why I will going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you. Obviously, I'm quite happy to have brought the amendment as an option to show, because obviously I won't support the base recommendation but I wanted to have an amendment there to show how we would have been willing to support this by trimming funds from elsewhere, because I have attracted some insect attention, sorry. Yeah, so I don't want to just keep adding programs into this budget that is going to keep putting things back in when I've been very clear. You know, if I go out in the community and say we need to get our rates increased down to this level, I want to have provided options where we can actually obtain that, so it's not just words in the community without action to show how we could have got there. So that's why I don't mind if people don't support the amendment, that's fine, but it's just trying to show that I would have supported this base amendment had we been able to find that funding from elsewhere. Given the amendment will likely fail, I will therefore not support the base one either. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, everyone. I've been walking around the streets lately just to have a look at things and see what the vibe is. And I think we're all probably struck by the fact that there are more and more people who are homeless, who are in need, who are struggling. We also, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that the healthcare provisions are getting less and less. And we know that. We've seen things come out through Patient Voice and so forth, those kind of organisations, about the amazing cuts, the horrible cuts that have happened in healthcare, mental health care and a whole lot of other things. MASH Trust and other organisations do an amazing job looking after people. Things almost on a weekly basis are getting tougher and tougher and tougher. They didn't anticipate probably this when they came in initially for a request for funding, but we do know that what they are working with is insufficient to meet the needs of the people that are the most vulnerable. And I won't support the amendment, however, I do support the substantial, and because I can see it in our community. And if we don't give funding or resourcing to these people who are in desperate need of being off the streets, having a nice kai, having services, people there, it's like a gateway to getting those services that they need. And they're not all the services, but they're in part and it's a help. So I think by supporting giving them $25,000 for this year, for the financial year coming up, it would mean we'd be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Because I think it would be a false economy if we didn't support those who are most vulnerable. The demand, the need, the evidence of what's happening would be even greater, and there would be a greater cost to society if we don't. Kia ora koutou.
And right to reply, Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just firstly speaking to the process issues that have been raised today about the appropriateness of using an amendment to enable an activity. I don't agree with the comparison to yesterday's resolution, which included two directions within the same resolution. But an amendment is an entirely appropriate mechanism to enable reprioritisation, and within our standing orders this is an entirely appropriate way to test whether the room would like to enable an activity through this sort of substitution or trade-off. I think everyone is obviously entitled to decide on each aspect individually, and I would urge you to consider, I mean, perhaps Councillor Fitzgerald's made the assumption that it won't be supported. I'm still hopeful that it will be supported. And why I'm hopeful is that our community have really, through the submission, said things like do what's most important, reprioritise and do things within existing budgets. I've heard that really loud and clear. So when there is a real need, and we've certainly explored some of those today and added around 165,000 to the budget over and above what we had in the plan there already, when something that has some validity is placed on the table, I do think it's appropriate to consider how can we fund that. And Councillor Finlay explained all the reasons why he thought that we should be funding it, but he didn't address how we're going to fund it. And I think sometimes that's only one side of the equation, and I'd urge you to consider both sides of the equation of what the activity is that we're funding and also how we're going to fund that activity. So from that perspective, I'd really urge you to support the amendment as a mechanism to help fund a very real need.
Okay. Are you in the queue for the substantive? Okay. All right. We will vote on the amendment, please. That has failed. 5 votes for, 11 against. All right, we come back to the substantive, and I'll give you the right to... Does anybody else want to speak to the substantive? I think we've done everything. Back to you, Councillor, for a right to reply.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I did just want to address some of the comments that have been made. And I understand that, you know, not everybody is as familiar necessarily with the setup as some of us are, but the funding that is for homelessness outreach, that funds a worker and a salary. That doesn't fund meals for people coming into Luck Venue. So although the contract is held by MASH, They're entirely separate funds, and it's not as if MASH can use that money to buy food to feed people. So I think we're kind of muddying the waters a bit by referring to that. That's not available to them for food purchase at all. A couple of people have mentioned sort of weighing one thing against another. What do we think is worth spending money on, and where would we see a reduction? And, you know, it was only yesterday that councillors felt that a $60,000 gift to developers was well worth it. And when I weigh that up against $25,000 to a charitable organisation providing free food, free breakfast, they don't even provide a free lunch, people have to pay for that, by the way, a free breakfast to vulnerable people, those two things don't add up in my mind. It's not going to be a significant burden on rates. With the help of my learned colleague here, I did a quick calculation. It would work out as 0.017% on rates, which is very, very small. And in terms of the good that that money is doing, I think it's good value, let's put it like that. A couple of people have mentioned fairness regarding other groups. There is precedent where circumstances are exceptional for us to make small grants through the chamber. Life-saving was mentioned. I remember we've done it for the Rugby Museum in the past as well. That avenue is available to groups where there's an unusual circumstance. And I would say to you that a 31% increase in people coming in for food is an unusual circumstance and could not possibly have been anticipated when MASH put their request in for their 3-year strategic priority grant. So, my argument is this is exceptional. These are vulnerable people. It's an organisation doing good work, which, as Councillor Bowen pointed out, benefits not only the people themselves, but it's a public good in terms of helping people to have somewhere to be where they're safe and warm and avoiding them sheltering in doorways in the CBD. So I would ask for your support, please.
All right, we will vote on the substantive. And that has passed 12 votes for and 4 against. Okay, we've got some new motions, so we'll bring those up, please. So this one is from Councillor Naylor. This is around Council Defer Programme 2524, feasibility study for the 50-metre pool, 104,000 for consideration during the 2737 LTP. Naylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an additional one, just in an attempt to try and offset some of the additional funds that have been added in, which obviously are for more important things. The feasibility study for a 50-metre pool, the reason why I've identified this one is that I have big reservations about whether council can actually afford to fund a pool. And I also feel that there are lots of planning work done, there's a lot of investment into plans, feasibility studies, of things that probably will never actually eventuate. And at this stage, I'm not saying it shouldn't happen at any stage, but I'm saying let's defer this. This is $104,000 that could be deferred. I think there's a lot of other activity that is probably a higher priority in my mind in the next year, particularly around waters and some of the changes. And there's a lot in the parks and reserve space, the arena activity and other parks and reserves. There's a lot of activity in that space. I think this is one program that I think can be deferred for 1 year. So I'd ask for your support.
Councillor Bowen?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Question for officers, if I could. I don't know who. If this had been in the annual budget document, would we have received substantially different submissions?
Who's game to answer that?
I mean, I do have an
The
opinion.
I think the CE's going to do this one.
For a crack. Through Mr Mayor, well, it's hard to say. People do provide submissions back on information that is presented to them. If information had been in there, sure, people may have done that, but they may not have as well. So it does depend on what people's interest is at the time.
I think we call that a bob each way. I will respectfully disagree with the Chief Executive on that, because those of us who sat around this table for any length of time will know that our aquatics community are vociferous in their advocacy for the facilities that they would like us to consider. And I think it was the last LTP where there were literally hundreds of submissions around swimming pool feasibility. So I feel incredibly confident in saying that if this had been part of our proposal, as a very valid question, that this is something we could defer, if we'd gone out to our community to say, what do you think, we would have had substantially different submissions. And for me, this is about process integrity, and we may come back to that in some of the other recommendations in front of us. If we're planning to do something substantially different that affects a particular part of the community, then we should tell them that that's what we're thinking and invite their submissions on it. We didn't do that in this case. It might have been a perfectly valid thing to propose, but we didn't, and so I won't support it.
Councillor Wood?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I do slightly disagree with Councillor Bowen. I do agree we would have got more submissions on it, but I have raised in the chamber before that often prior to annual budget consultations, councillors aren't willing to put things in for consideration, and then after the fact, councillors are willing to take things out. And so I would be very open to us having a process where we said, here's some areas we're considering deferral on, what would you think, without actually taking them out of the budget to start with, if that would be an open mechanism to deal with this conversation that keeps coming up. But anyway, we can talk about that another time. The reason I won't support deferring this is because I have a strong belief that this work needs to be done. Just this year, Manawatu District Council has announced they're looking at building a 25-metre indoor pool and replacing the outdoor pool at the Makina. So there's a real opportunity to link in with their work this year and see if there's a way that we could do it together, halve the operating costs, halve the capital costs, do a joint program. That seems like a sensible, it seems like the right time to have this conversation, rather than delaying it for a year. I think it would be madness for the two councils to go out and do their own feasibilities and then not even talk to each other about it. So that would be my challenge to our officers. Please engage with MDC, given they're looking at a similar thing. I agree with Councillor Naylor that we shouldn't build the expectation that we're then going to go build this, and it's clear that there's no funding program in our LTP for $30 million to build a new pool. However, the last 3 or 4 major pools that have been built in our region or in the lower North Island were built when all of a sudden the Shovel Ready Project Fund became available and 3 councils could go, yep, here's our project, bing, bang, boom. And although I can't predict the future, if Shane Jones lives and breathes in politics, I'm sure he'll come around again with another bucket of money. He will. And who knows, there may be other funds that come available in the future. So my intention with this work is that we have a document that we have in the drawer that we can pull out when funding becomes available, that we can pull out of grant funding that we weren't expecting becomes available, that we can pull out at a time we could do something. It's not wishing for money to appear. I appreciate that it may or may not, but I think this is the year to start doing that feasibility, to have that work ready. We know that there is not enough lane space in the community. Our studies have shown that extensively, that we have young people training at 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, just trying to get lane space because there's not enough available in the city. So I would love in the long-term plan if we could go, yep, here's the money to build the new pool. I appreciate we probably can't. I've been turned off. Was that my 5 minutes, Mr. Mayor? Let's at least get this work in the program and get a plan ready.
Good, you took the hint there. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to support this deferral for a couple of reasons. One, I was about to make the very same point as Councillor Bowen. To me, it's very unfair to the community where they have substantially advocated for something and submitted on it repeatedly in plan after plan, for them to get it into the long-term plan, for us to then take it out or defer it without further consultation with the community. And I do think that if we had put this in the draft and said we're planning to defer this, that we would have had a raft of submissions from the swimming community asking us not to. So I'm unhappy with this kind of a thing where it's a significant community interest with doing a deferral at this stage without having signalled that that might be a possibility and given people the opportunity to comment. So I wouldn't support it on that basis, but also it was meant to be done last year and was deferred from last year. So we've already deferred it once, and there comes a point where programmes are repeatedly deferred where the community loses confidence that we're ever going to do the thing. I just think in this case it would be a breach of confidence with the community to do this. And so I'm not going to support it on that basis. Do I have any particular, desire for a new pool myself personally? No. But I do consider that it's one of these projects that we have committed to doing the feasibility, and we should honour that commitment and not keep deferring it. The other thing I would like to say, Councillor Naylor has mentioned a couple of times about how much money we've added to the budget. And one way of looking at it is that, yes, for example, we have agreed to an $80,000 budget for the bus lounge. But remember, we're only paying $10,700 of that. In terms of the soft plastics, yes, we've agreed to a budget for that, but remember there's income associated with that, and so on. So where we actually end up is an addition so far of $103,000 to the budget, net. Okay, so I just think we're spending a lot of time on small amounts, and in this particular case, we've committed to the swimming community to do this feasibility, and we should get on and do the thing.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, sir. Look, I agree with Councillor Bowen and Councillor Johnson. Bad process to do this. This has long history, longer than me, longer than lots. So I found out. And yeah, it certainly doesn't sit right with me to play Russian roulette with something like this. So on that basis, I won't support that. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Naylor, right to reply.
Thank you. Just a couple of things which I find really frustrating is that those who are advocating now that we can't change things now because we should have indicated before consultation that we were going to change them were also the people that advocated in December when we put options on the table and said, let's remove this and say to the community, these things we're not including, but if they're not happy with that, ask, expect to get some feedback. They're the same people that advocated not to do that then. So I think some people in this room are just really quite keen on increasing the rates no matter what. That's how it seems to me. I do not believe 104,000 is a small amount. I think it's quite a lot. And I think it's a very expensive document to put in the drawer in case we need it. We've got so many documents that we've spent money on that are sitting in the drawer in case we need it. And I think we need to think about using our money for actually delivering outcomes rather than just preparing for things that may not happen. So I'd urge you to support this. I think in the whole scheme of things, it's one of the less important things to progress in the current year. The other thing is that we've heard feedback on, the recreation and play area is the biggest net cost to council. It's bigger than roads, it's bigger than water. And the feedback we're hearing from our community is, why are we spending the biggest bucket of money on recreational and play? And this is why. This council appears to be unwilling to reprioritise when the community is crying out to limits and budget. And that really does disappoint me. So anyway, I thought this was very much worth consideration to defer just for 1 year. Another expensive document in the drawer.
Okay, we will vote on the recommendation around deferring the feasibility study on the pool. That has failed, 4 votes for and 12 against. Okay, we've got another one from Councillor Naylor, and this is that council cap the confirmed remuneration budget, and that if additional budget is required throughout the year, that the Chief Executive brings a request back to council. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Slightly different wording, but pretty much means the same thing. So yesterday we discussed the remuneration budget, and the vote was quite close, but confirmed a decision to keep the actual amount as per the what council officers have proposed, which is just slightly more than what we consulted on. Something that I heard from a few of you was that the principle of having the budget capped so that there is some discipline around officers working within that overall envelope was actually a healthy one, and one that they did like, but they just didn't necessarily want the amount of the budget to be reduced. So that is in place for this year, and there has been some discussion. As I understand it, going forward, that's not in place unless we give that direction. So this simply gives the direction that the approved budget, which was confirmed yesterday, as remaining at I think 69 I can't remember, 63.9 I think it was, that be kept, and that if any additional budget is required throughout the year, that the CE brings a request to council. I hope that's clear.
Councillor, Barrett.
Yes, some patterns. Indeed, it is Councillor Barrett this time, and Councillor Naylor and I on the same page. I think that it's a useful reminder to ourselves, to the Chief Executive, and assurance to have this in place. Obviously, we end up setting an overall budget, but having a few demarcations within that so that there's some certainty around where that spend is actually driven through does make sense. I was certainly one of us, and I remember quite a number of colleagues in the room being reasonably surprised when a report came back not so long ago that had a couple $1 million extra that had been transferred quite legitimately at the time, had been transferred from other areas of budget to remuneration. And I think it's useful to have those conversations before that happens rather than after.
Okay. Nobody else wants to speak? You don't need to write a reply. We will vote, please. That has passed, 13 votes for and 3 against. Okay, we'll now come to do the substantive for the operating programs. Just get that up. Okay, so this is 1B. The council instruct the Chief Executive to prepare, whoops, we can just, okay, thank you, that's great. Start again. 1B, the council instruct the Chief Executive to prepare a draft annual budget 26-27 for consideration and adoption by the council at its meeting on the 3rd of June 2026. And that incorporates the following operating programs, including carry forwards relating to program 1520 and program 519 as outlined in the annual budget 26-27, the schedule of proposed operating programs attachment 5, and any motions agreed above. I'm happy to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. and we will vote. And that is passed 14 votes for and 2 against. Okay, we'll have a break now, and we will be back in the chamber at 10 to 11. Welcome back. We're making reasonably good progress, so we have some tidy-ups to do. But before we go there, I just want to confirm exactly where we're at with the rates.
Yeah, through the Mayor, currently sitting at 4.23.
Okay, all right. Well, colleagues, sort of based on that information, I'd like to propose a final extra motion that the CE present a budget that has no more than 3.9% rate increase in it, which would allow an option of the CE exploring that gap, or 0.3%, factoring in any movements around, which would come back to the June meeting, any extra revenue sources, and I do understand there is some small pieces around, and any other efficiencies within the organisation, and obviously with the recommendation that's yet to come back to this council around the arena project as well. So I have a seconder for that, Councillor Hapata, and I just welcome people's comments. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a level of discomfort with this because we've just spent the last day and now some debating a series of recommendations that would have got us, you know, to a different point to where we're at today, and some have passed and some have failed. And I intend always to come into the annual budget process earnestly with, here's how I see areas we could reduce to get to that point, and whether things get across the line or not, that's fine, that's what the Chamber's for. In the past, when we've done catch-all recommendations, like we've done with professional services, like we've done with overheads in this budget, we've asked for the Chief Executive to report back on the implications of X recommendation. And I do feel somewhat, given we've just gone through this process, it would be passing on our responsibility just to say to the Chief Executive, well, you know the things we don't want to do because we haven't voted for them and there's a recommendation in the Chamber, you find other ways of doing it. So I'd like to move an amendment, and I'll read it out and then see if there's a seconder, the Chief Executive present options on the 3rd of June and the implications of a 3.9% increase. Councillor Bowen is happy to second that. It's not that, I mean, look, I think it's been incredibly clear over the last 24 hours, I would like to see a rate increase under 4%. I'd like to see it, frankly, down near inflation, 3.1, 3.5, 3.6, somewhere around there. So it's no secret that I think this is a worthy goal, but I'm not comfortable just saying executive go off and do it. I'd like to see what the options and implications are. I think this will have some intersection with the overhead recommendation that we've passed. There may be some commonality there, but there may be other things. So, and you just add to the, oh no, it's got the 3rd of June in there. So yeah, I would hope you would support this amendment to what that would be, but not just give the Chief Executive a blank cheque to go and do what he needs to do, or a negative cheque.
Don't think that was what the intention was, but anyway, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, I also feel quite uncomfortable about this as an option, even with the options and implications coming back to us. And that feeling is based on experience. So let's take you back, to those of you who weren't here, to the COVID budget, as we call it, where some esteemed members decided that we were going to have a rates increase of no more than, I think it was 2% or something at the time. And the same sort of thing was put up. Chief Executive present a budget that's no more than 2% rate increase in that case, and bring the options and implications back. Now, what happened was, of course, there was publicity and public expectation that the rates increase would be, in that case, 2%. And when the options came back, some of them were highly unpalatable. They included cuts to library expenditure, for example, and there were other things that would never have passed in the Chamber at all. But yet they were on the list. And of course, members around the table were kind of in the situation of, well, we've sort of gone out to the public and said it's only going to be 2%, and these are the options that the CE has found, so I guess we'll have to agree to it. And as I think, as Councillor Finlay reminded us yesterday, I was one of the few people that objected. So this is a risky strategy. It's much better for us to identify where we think reductions could be made, debate them and vote on them. When a list comes back on the 3rd of June, it will be too late to do that. Nobody will want to say, oh, let's not do whatever cut this is that the Chief Executive has proposed, because that would, in inverted commas, increase the rates past what I do feel is a marketer's approach of a 3.9%, so that it starts with a 3 rather than a 4. So I'm very uncomfortable with options and implications, as well as I am as the whole thing as a catch-all proposal. We already asked the Chief Executive to find as much saving as he could. Remember that in the long-term plan, this was meant to be an 8.5% increase this year. So I just don't think, A, that this is realistic, and B, that we should be delegating where the cuts fall. And then basically all we're going to do on the 3rd of June, if this comes back, is we're going to say, oh, yep, right, go ahead. Doesn't matter what's in it. I can promise you that. And even if I'm again the lone voice saying this is foolish, you know, I can see that people are very, very keen to keep the rates below 4%. Maybe those that have swallowed the government Kool-Aid and think that it's important to keep rates between 2 and 4%. Maybe those who say that they support the vulnerable, although they didn't vote for increased funding for people who haven't got enough to eat. Maybe those who have listened to some of the submissions, but not all, because there were plenty of submissions that warned about the risk of reducing the rates below 4.9%. Plenty of submissions that warned about the risk of deferrals, kicking the can down the road and not investing in the community. So I don't support this. I don't support the amendment of an options and implications coming back, because I know from experience that when that report comes back, it's going to be too late to do anything about it.
Councillor Barrett.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to reflect on the last couple of days' work and then decide if we want to do it all again. I'm very much of the view that we've done the work and that that's a quite reasonable place to set down the debate and the idea of, sending officers away to do a whole lot more work, and then come back with something that, yes, who knows what shape or form it might be in, is not good governance or process in my view. And I know that both the mover and seconder of the amendment are well-respected debaters in this chamber who greatly enjoy a debate, and perhaps they just haven't had quite enough over the last 2 days and need a bit more. But I don't see it as a particularly useful use of time nor of our relationship with the community to take this approach where we work through everything, work through submissions, and then just take a carte blanche on a number. The other thing I wanted to comment on is the appropriateness of kind of having targets, whether they're a whatever it is, the 3.9 or CPI, et cetera. And I think in particular things like CPI tend to be deeply problematic because they're significantly lagging indicators, significantly. And I don't think anybody can look at the year ahead where we've just, as a council, had to absorb a doubling of the diesel budget and expect that inflation is going to somehow magically bypass this community. There is going to be significant upward pressure on costs, et cetera, and I do not think that our CPI outlook is anything like our CPI in the rearview mirror, and so I don't see that as a very appropriate drive to go ever lower and lower and lower. The reality is that when the challenges come into economies and come into communities, we do need a strong council provision of the essential services so that the community is well supported through those rough patches, rather than going, oh gosh, it's a rough patch, we just need to cut back all of our core and essential services for communities. So I'm not into the drive it ever lower. I think CPI is a very poor proxy for that. I think deciding that something needs to start with a 3 rather than a 4 after we've had a substantial effort and debate after the community's had a substantial effort in consultation is just not a helpful approach. So I won't be voting in support of the amendment, and I won't be voting in support of the substantive.
Colleagues, I'll speak to the amendment. Look, I disagree with the process. It has allowed various projects to be debated at length, and they either fly or they don't. I've made no secret that I was keen to get a 3 in front of the rates. You know that. And look, this is different to the COVID budget. That was a 5 to 6% change. And yes, Councillor Johnson is right, there was some ramifications from this. This is massively different. This is a 0.3 ask, and I'm okay with the amendment, and I will support it because the implications are important as well. But the risk here is quite small, and the uplift to our community is good. So I do hope that you can support it, because we're not talking masses of change, we're talking a tweak. But it is quite a significant tweak. So I do hope you can support the amendment. Councillor Barn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My reason in supporting this amendment is to enable councillors who are interested in this conversation to have some information about the implications of the things they're deciding on. Also, you teased us with a list of things that sounded quite good, not things that sounded bad. So I'm hoping that your options package is good things. Also, options is what I'm after there, not just this is a list of things that you have to do to get to 3.9%, but what is the potential in that space? What could people choose from if there are options there? That's what might be useful to a debate, although noting my colleague's comment that maybe I like the debate too much. And you're right, 0.3% is not huge. But I don't like this as a process. And so I think the amendment provides a kind of belt and braces approach to going, if you're going to make this decision, at least be aware of what it is you're deciding on and maybe look for some choices and some trade-offs. But do I like this approach? No. So I'll support the amendment, but I won't support the substantive because I don't think that's a good process. I think the amendment is a better process, but maybe the best of a bad bunch. But I'm looking for some options here.
Councillor Harpiter. Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think there's nothing wrong with the process. I think anyone's got any right to put any substantive recommendation up, and they can do at their will, which is what everybody has done today. I think at the end of the day, putting a recommendation up like this gives direction to our Chief Executive, and that's what all this is doing, is giving a direction and asking for a potential 300,000 off, and that's what this is looking at. The amendment is now giving another direction, which is looking for options and implications. So I think the amendment is fine, but I also think the substantive was fine as well. So I think at the end of the day, I'd vote for both of them. I don't think there's anything wrong with either of them. Thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you. I'm very uncomfortable with this. We've got a vague statement put up to achieve a 3.9 by 2 members of this council that haven't brought forward any proposed amendments to reduce expenditure, and that have voted against most amendments by other councillors to reduce expenditure. This is weak. It lacks backbone. It's our job to make the hard decisions as to how we reach our desired rates increase, not to foist it off to officers. And I don't know if I want to vote for this or not, to be honest, because I support the desire to get rates down, but it is our decision to get there, not to just foist it off and let someone else make the hard decisions for us. We are elected to do that. So I think I'll vote for the amendment, but if that fails, I will not vote for the substantive.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, sir. Look, I think it's important to have goals. I also think it's important to always leave the door open. No point slamming it shut. And, you know, I look forward to the options coming forward. And there we go. We'll see what we get. Thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I struggle with this a little bit because I believe this resolution is an abdication of our responsibility as elected members. And I would go so far as that it borders on lazy. Some of us around the table have spent hours and hours and hours going through the budgets, finding options for reductions. 4 of us have proposed reductions. The mover and the seconder have not proposed anything to achieve what this resolution is trying to achieve. Instead is abdicating that responsibility to the Chief Executive. I'm really disappointed with the way in which the mover and the seconder have gone about that, and it does undermine the work that we've done over the last 7 or 8 hours. At the same time, it would get us closer to where I believe is affordable for our community. So I'm in a really conflicted position. Reflecting on the COVID budget, I was comfortable with the outcome of that. I did not believe any of the changes were unpalatable. I was pleasantly surprised at the pragmatism of the options that were placed in front of us. Given my previous remarks, I also have incredible confidence in the Chief Executive to be pragmatic in the way that, if this is successful, to look at the organisation. And the nature of some of my questions yesterday reflect that I do believe there are potential reductions that could be made. For example, I'm really pleased that we've got a smaller capital program, 13% lower than what we consulted on. I do believe there should be less effort that is required to deliver a slightly smaller capital program, and hopefully some efficiencies or savings that can come from that. I also think that there may be opportunities for additional revenue, and I do think the Chief Executive is in the best position to be able to explore all options. So whilst I've got some disappointment in the way this has come about, I will support it. And reflecting on the capital program and reflecting on the process we've been through the last 2 days, I'm really appreciative of the work that the officers have done to get that down to a more realistic level. In years gone by, some of us would be bringing programs, lists of programs, and we spend hours and hours trying to get it with very little success. I appreciate that officers have heard that message and are trying to put something in front of us that is more realistic. In the same way, I'm hopeful that if this is supported, officers will hear that this is closer to what we're wanting to deliver on behalf of our community. Whilst I think the responsibility ultimately should sit with us, I think there are members around this table that literally aren't prepared to do the work that's involved to do it that way. So on that basis, I will support it, but just want to express my disappointment perhaps with the process.
Colleagues, just a point of order. I did actually vote for several reductions.
Mr. Mayor, I didn't say anything about the vote.
No, not you. I wasn't. It was directed to your colleagues.
Oh, well, if you say point of order and I've just spoken, you probably need to say who you...
Okay, sorry. My apologies, but I did vote for several. But anyway,
I didn't say you didn't vote for them. I said most weren't supported, and didn't propose any. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we just need to get on with it. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I have a question first? It relates to Tamakuku Terrace sales revenue and expenditure on page 133. I just wanted to understand where it says not correctly accounted for, increasing both revenue and expenditure, and it's got a 2.4. Can I understand, have we incorporated some income stream from that? And if we've covered it, apologies, but I just want to clarify the status.
Through Mr. Mayor, what that was in relation to is the way in which it's been shown in budgets has been a net figure. It doesn't offset the rates at this point in time because effectively it's going into the balance sheet at this point. install, it's probably getting close. I don't know exactly where it is in terms of its profitability status from a cash flow perspective. We're just working through the detail of that at the moment.
Okay. Thank you. And then can I understand what the training budget is set at for this next financial year for elected members? Who could answer that one?
I'm just, so where is the line of questioning? Are you trying to find out what the options are?
Yeah, so I'm just wanted to find out what the value of that is.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't know that off the top of my head. I'm looking at the team that can look up the budgets. I appreciate it does sit with me. I can give you a round number, but I'd rather get it accurate.
Yeah, perhaps, councillor, we can just search that and before the question's finished, come back to you on that answer or on that one.
Okay. They're just questions I wanted to have to enlighten my vote for this. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Zabellin.
Thank you. I do really appreciate the intent behind the substantive and the amendment. I do agree with the points made that the responsibility to find those particular reductions does lie with us, but I probably wouldn't use as strong a language as has been used. I think that we started work on this months ago, and we know that this has been through multiple iterations and downsizing. We know that staff have been asked to find savings already in each department, and we know what the list of referrals is that's been deferred, and that's quite a long list. So I think we have done a lot of this work already, and I think that stands. I also think that our assumptions going into this budget have, this world situation and the economic situation has changed quite a lot since we began this process. And while we have factored that in to some extent, things can change very quickly. And I'm just wary of, as has been pointed out, that even if we have options and implications coming on what a 3.9 rate increase would mean, that I feel like that still sets us up to sort of lock that in to a certain extent, regardless of what actually comes into it, because of the optics of it. So I really do appreciate the intent, but I think there's a lot of things that could change in the next year, and I think that where we've landed is reasonable after months and months of shaping and cutting and changing and deferring. So I think I'll oppose both. Thank you.
All right, we're just waiting for an answer. Thank you. Okay. All right, Councillor Wood, write a reply.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, colleagues. I actually agree with what most of you have said, particularly Councillor Bowen, Barrett, Fitzgerald. My intention with moving this amendment is if we were going to go down this path, I would like to see what the options implications were, not just hand over a blank cheque. So I will vote for the amendment in its form, but if it does become substantive, I'm not inclined to vote for it. We have a resolution on the board now that the councillors were not willing to cap the remuneration budget for council. So that means when the Chief Executive goes away to figure out how to do this, if you look at our expense line on page 196, employee expenses are one of the key ones, 65 million. Depreciation and amortisation, you can't just not depreciate your assets, so that's not a choice. Your finance costs, you can't choose not to have debt, so that's not a choice. So the only other area that's left is the other expenses, which is 40% of the budget, and we've already got a resolution in place to look at a 1% reduction to the overheads, which make up about half of that. So we've chunked down through these debates the wiggle room that the Chief Executive now has to go off and deal with this. If the intention was to get a 3.9% rate increase, why not just move that at the start of yesterday and be done with it? We all go home by lunchtime, you know, jobs are good. And I think, I agree with Councillor Isabel, and, you know, your view is that we're comfortable where we've got to. I agree that where we've got to at 4.25% is the will of the elected chamber. I'm personally not comfortable with it, and I probably won't vote for it when we get there, but that's not to say that it isn't the will of the majority of people around the table. We've just debated a series of recommendations, and I do think it is, I hesitate to use the word lazy, but I've spent, as many of us have spent, tens of hours going through these budgets, reading submissions, coming up with ideas, putting proposals to you, and I know you find it frustrating when we come with a list of proposals of how you can reduce rates, but that is a result of, I hope you can at least respect, it's a result of a lot of work that goes in at the other end to go, where are some areas we could see some optionality. And so some of them have passed and some of them have failed, and that was our choices. I want to get the rates to 3.9%, and so you're putting me in a very awkward position where I'm going to have to vote against a catch-all resolution, because I really am not comfortable with it. So I will vote for the amendment, and I'd encourage you to do so as well, to get it so that if it was to pass, at least we get the opposite implications back, but I don't think I'll vote for the substantive.
All right, we're voting on the amendment. And that's passed 16 votes, none against. All right. And now we come to the substantive. All right, and we'll vote on the substantive, please. And it has passed 10 votes for and 6 against. Okay, we come to rating now. And 2, that the draft annual budget 2026-27 include the following rating assumptions. A, uniform annual general charge of $300. B, differential surcharges unchanged from those included in the draft of public consultation. C, targeted rates for services adjusted as necessary to reflect changes to the budgets for the activities concerned. I'm happy to move those. Seconded by... Oh, okay, seconded by Councillor Bowen. Finding it hard to get a seconder. Colleagues, I'll open it up for commentary. Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, I'm not going to make a big deal of this, but I'm not going to be supporting a uniform annual general charge of $300. It used to be $200. The higher the uniform annual general charges, the more the flat tax affects those who have less money to pay their rates. And as I made the point last year, and I'll make it every year if need be, if you want to help people who are struggling to pay their rates, you need to reduce the amount of flat tax that we put in the rates, so that more of the rating is related to the value of the property. The only people that increasing the flat tax helps is those that have got higher value properties whose rates are higher, because it's put in to reduce their rates. So if you want to help people who have got lower value properties, who may more likely be struggling to pay their rates, then we need a lower uniform annual general charge. And I've been very consistent about this ever since I came onto council, and I don't support the 300. It was fine at 200. It was increased to reduce rates for a certain section of the population. So I would ask that 2A be separated out, please. I don't necessarily expect anyone to agree with me, but I'm making my point.
Okay, we'll do 2A first, please. And then we'll do 2B and 2C second. So we'll vote, if there's no other speakers, we'll vote on A, the Uniform Annual General Charge of $300, please. That is failed. 6 votes for and 10 against. So we'll need to put up something else. Okay, before we do that, we'll go to B, and so we'll do that. Okay, so we've got, we'll vote on B and C, please. That has passed 16 votes for, none against. Okay, we've got to do something with, yeah, hold on, just before you do that, I've got Councillor Johnson in there first. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I did have my light on first, Councillor Dennison. I'm happy to move a uniform annual general charge of $200, and Councillor McLeod will second it.
Okay. So, seconded by Councillor McLeod. Can I just ask a question first before, just to the CE and perhaps the CFO, what does this do to our overall budget now?
Through Mr Mayor, it doesn't change the budget, it changes the distribution of rates.
Okay, all right. Okay. You don't need to speak to it. Does anybody else want to speak to it? Councillor Naylor.
Just a quick question, because I wasn't aware this was coming and some of the information is a little bit vague in my memory. But with the change to capital value, am I correct to understand that those who are affected more significantly with bigger increases will, that a higher UAGC minimises that? Is that a correct understanding? Probably Steve's probably the best person to answer, but I've just, it's a few years ago that we had all of that information in front of us, and that was the recollection I have, but I just wanted to check with the officers if that's the correct assumption.
So you're saying the higher the you are at UGC,
it smooths the changes at the upper end.
Maybe I'll just get a comment from the staff.
Steve Patterson, Manager Financial Strategy. I haven't modelled recently a change to have a lower UAGC. I haven't come prepared to have the information in front of you, to be honest. But certainly in terms of the way I recall it, when we implemented a $300 UAGC, part of the rationale for that was to offset some of the implications of the changes that were being made through the change to the land and capital value ratios. I have, a while back, a month or so back, modelled some of the possibilities, the implications of that, but as I said, I don't have that material with me at the moment.
Thank you. I'm happy to speak to this. Thank you. I have some sympathy for this in a normal year where we're not moving to change to a higher percentage of capital value. But I think there's an assumption that's made by advocates and perhaps the mover of this, that someone's ability to pay has a direct correlation to the value of their property. And I agree that is the case in many situations. However, there are some situations with people in our community, and I'm particularly thinking of some of the senior members in our community who've lived in a house for all their life. They might be on a fixed income and don't have a desire to move. It's a very big upheaval for an old person to move from a house that they've lived in for a long time. The reason I supported a slightly bigger UAGC was for that very reason, because I understood what's just been confirmed, that having a higher UAGC offsets some of the implication to that. So I know there's another recommendation yet to come that would ask us to pause the move to capital value, and I've supported that process, but I do have some concerns about the way that that's impacting on some people in our community in terms of the increase in rates, particularly over a 3-year period where we've had a 10, 6 and then maybe 3.9% increase. So I think there's two things here that I'm weighing up both, and you can't make the decision for both at the same time. But if we're going to continue to progress the change to capital value, I don't think it's appropriate to lower the UAGC, because that is the mechanism to smooth some of those negative effects for some of those people who, I've spoken to people who've had a 50% rates increase during that process. And I believe it's a fair system, but I'm also aware that the change to that system negatively impacts some people who may not be prepared to be able to manage that change. So I won't support the change to 200 at this time. I may be interested in the future when we're not transitioning to capital value.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you. This is quite a significant change to the way we calculate people's rates, and for us to do something like this at the end of a process with zero consultation with the community on it is really poor. Really poor. If we were going to do this, we should have put out options to our community to get their opinion on. So I can't support this. As someone who may actually even personally benefit from it on a lower rating system, but I can't support it. If anything, I actually support higher uniform annual general charges to smooth out, because everyone uses council services and everyone should pay a fair amount for that. So no, I think this is completely the wrong way to do it, but perhaps next year we could consult on that and the community could have a say, sure, but to just unilaterally throw this in at the end, no. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, such fun. I continue to be amused that we all use the same arguments for our own purposes. And so Councillor Fitzgerald, just hold that thought till the next one about LVCV. This isn't a new debate. We consult on this all the time. What is the appropriate level of UAGC? Councillor Johnson is spectacularly consistent in advocating for this. This is not a surprise to our community that we see a lever to be pulled here in UAGC. It is no news to anybody, and it was the subject of some conversation over morning tea, that UAGC is the most regressive part of our rating system. It's a poll tax. It applies across the board, blind of ability to pay. And yes, I totally accept that there is no good measure of ability to pay in the rating system. It's not set up to do that, but we do take property value as an indicator. Not a perfect one, not the only one, but an indicator of ability to pay. But UAGC doesn't speak to that. It speaks to how the incidence of rates falls. We're talking about a $100 decrease on the UAGC into people's rates, which will benefit the people who are least able to pay. No question about that. By large majority, not 100%, but by large majority, the people who are least able to pay. And to the point about the impact of changes to the rating system, like the officer, I didn't come quite prepared to have this debate, but I do recall that we put in place a hardship fund for people who were struggling to pay their rates as a result of changes to our system. And I think, from memory, nobody has yet been granted any money from that hardship fund. Nobody has made that case. So, yes, it has an implication for people. Yes, some people may find that incentive rates doesn't fall well for them. But so far, nobody has been able to show significant hardship because of that, to a point that their rates would be rebated for that. So we put that in place in case that hasn't proved to be necessary. So I'm perfectly comfortable with us just shifting how the rates falls to protect our most vulnerable.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you. Also referenced that I hadn't come prepared with arguments around this, but it's true that this has not been consulted to lower or increase it, in fact. I'm looking for some information even on the number, if there was a submitter that even raised it. I referred to some of the concerns around not proposing the feasibility study be deferred and how much interest that might have generated when that got proposed and voted down. And so this one here, I'm conflicted because the argument about ability to pay is a little bit unknowing the outsiding impacts of moderating the extremes is what the UAGC can do. And so when we are moving to intended, because we haven't consulted any change around the capital versus land value rating approach, that has a change, and then to have another change around the UAGC, it's an unknown for me, and I feel like people are voting blindly on it. So regardless of your ethics or where you see it personally, I just think the community aren't aware of the change, and maybe there would have been some feedback on it one way or the other if it was proposed a change in the draft. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Yeah, no, I disagree completely with Councillor Dennison and Fitzgerald. I mean, this is totally normal. We have this debate at the end of every single annual budget process. I appreciate for Councillor Kuru and Fitzgerald this is your first one, but I have no problem with us having this discussion, nor is it a surprise to me we're having this discussion, and so I'll be morally consistent, Councillor Bowen, for the next discussion. There's a few things I want to point out here, because the point gets raised is if you care about those on low incomes, aren't you being hypocritical by not supporting a UAGC? And that comes down to whether you believe that property value on rates is a fair mechanism to determine people's ability to pay. I accept it's our only mechanism, but I do not accept that it is a fair mechanism to do that. I think there are countless examples, particularly of seniors and pensioners in homes they've been in for 20 or 30 years on large sections with decent property value where they're still on a fixed income and aren't able to pay. And so what the UAGC does is level out some of the extremes. The modelling we all saw when we agreed to look at a hybrid system showed that increasing the UAGC mildly helped mitigate some of the most extremes on that. I remember we got those reports that had like 28 different scenarios in them, and it was a lot to wrap your head around, but we got there. And so I stand by the decision we made 2 years ago to put the UAGC at 300. I don't believe that it at all is a fair mechanism. That's why I object to the whole LVCV discussion, frankly, because I don't think either system is fair on anyone. I'd much rather we scrap property taxes altogether and just had an increase in income tax that went to councils. That would be a much fairer way of determining who can afford to pay what. But that's not the system we live under. And so the reason I don't think I'm being hypocritical, and I'm very welcome to argue it, is because I don't believe it's a fair system or a good determinant, and therefore I believe it is our responsibility to mitigate extreme changes for people who budget year on year with the expectation of my rate's going to go up or down this kind of amount. Well, down would be nice, generally up this amount. So it's not that I don't agree sort of in theory land that this would work. I don't agree in practice that it's a good mechanism, and I think it does more to push people to the extremes, which doesn't help anyone.
Councillor Zabellin.
Thank you. I just wanted to note that I don't see this as having been intentionally put up at the last minute and that's unfair to our community. We're debating this because the previous motion failed. And I think Councillor Johnson expected and said that she expected to be the sole dissenter. So I don't think there's an element of premeditation here. That's not intentionally cutting out the community voice. That's just responding in real time to the result of that vote. Thanks.
Councillor Johnson, right to reply.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Well, Councillor Zabellan is absolutely correct. I did not expect that the last motion would be lost. I fully expected to be the one dissenting voice because we had this debate previously and that was the case. However, you know, we are able to think on our feet in this chamber and we have now moved on. We need to have a uniform annual general charge of some sort, I would suggest to you, and therefore the $200 is back to where we were a couple of years ago. Just to address some of the points that have been made, it doesn't affect the budget. It doesn't affect the amount of rates we collect. It affects the distribution of those rates and where they fall. Did any submitters raise it? I don't recall, but plenty of submitters raised the burden of rates and how they were going to be struggling to pay their rates. And reducing the uniform annual general charge, on average, means that those that are less likely to be able to pay their rates pay less rates. Now, there's always going to be anecdotal evidence. We can all point to, you know, this particular person in this particular circumstance where they don't have a good ability to pay and they had to pay more. There's always, whenever there's any change to a rating system, you can't say it's going to be 100% this or that or the other. You can't say that. But overall, what changing the UAGC does is it shifts the burden of rates onto those who have higher value properties. That is what it does. And on the whole, those who own higher value properties are more wealthy than those who own lower value properties. Not exclusively, I admit, but on the whole. Finally, is this a significant change? It's not deeply significant. It's not going to make a huge difference. It will expose an extra $100 of revenue to the value of the property. So it's not really a hugely significant change, but it will make some change and it will help those at the bottom end, and that's why I'm happy to put it forward. And in terms of those who think that I had some kind of evil plan, look, I would love to say that, oh yes, I had this all sewn up and I knew I had the numbers, but in all honesty, Councillor, that is not the case. I thought I would be a lone protest vote. So you yourselves voted in the previous one. It wasn't some evil Machiavellian plan of mine.
All right, we'll vote on 2A around the UAGC at 200. And that's passed 12 votes for and 4 against. Okay. We move through now to the 2D around rating assumptions. And this from Councillor Wood, that Council retain the land value to capital value hybrid for rating allocation at the 2025-26 rate of 33% capital value to 66.67% land value for the annual budget 26-27, and that the question of continuing to a 50-50 split be referred to the 27-37 LTP. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This discussion is more important than ever after the last vote we had. The rationale for this, because I know the argument Councillor's going to make, is that we didn't consult on this. I want to start by saying this is exactly what we consulted on in our long-term plan. The preferred option of Council was a 70-30 land value to capital value split, and I respect the fact that councillors felt that didn't go far enough, and so voted at the time to go to a 50-50 split of capital and land value for the rating allocation, which wasn't an option that we consulted on at the time. And so that's perfectly fine. But where do we find ourselves 2 years later? We find ourselves with people coming into the chamber in earnest who've had a 20% rate increase last year, a 20% rate increase the year before that, and are now staring down the barrel of a 12 to 20% rate increase again. Largely rural in a lot of cases, although there are other areas where it impacts as well. And the argument I would put to you, councillors, is that we've made a good step change, we've seen the impact of it, And I think it would be valuable to give our community a year where they get a more normal rate increase that is in line with their expectations, and then we can actually consult the community next year as part of our LTP, if that's the will of council, on a 50-50 capital value split, or a full capital value system if that was the desire of the chamber to consult on. But I think we have made a significant change, and it would be fairer to our community to leave it where we're at. On the question of systems, and I alluded to it in my conversation with UAGC, the main thing that I got from our consultation on the LVCV discussion, and apologies to Councillor Fitzgerald and Kudu, was that we had roughly 33% of people who said stay with LV, 33% who said go to the hybrid, and 33% who said go to the new system. Roughly, one was 30 and one was 34, whatever, but it was about that. And we had people and submitters who came into this chamber and said, councillors, you are evil if you do not go to a capital value system, and you are hurting me and hurting other people if you don't. Then we had other people who came in and said, councillors, you are evil if you move from a land value system, and you're hurting me and hurting other people if you don't. And you know what they said on the split? They said, you're evil if you don't go to the split. And what that taught me through that whole consultation, and seeing it come down pretty much in thirds, was people broadly want what is in their best interest. That's natural. They looked at the system, went, what suits my needs and what suits my property best, and then said that is the best system and we should be going on that. We didn't actually have a broad sort of philosophical number of... We had a few philosophical submissions that came in, but to me this is a philosophical question. Do you think properties with a higher capital value represent a better ability to pay or a land value? Interestingly enough, in Wellington, they're leading a charge to move away from a capital value system at the moment toward land value for almost the exact same reasons as our councillors have charged toward a CV system. Like, watch the videos. They go, it disproportionately hurts those least able to pay. It does all of these terrible things, a capital value system, and that's why we need land, because it's fairer. And it's being pushed by the more left-leaning organisations in Wellington. And that, I look at that and I find it fascinating that people coming from the same position, the same desire, have the complete opposite views, and the complete cross of views. And I appreciate Wellington's not a perfect comparison to us, but it is interesting in evidencing that neither system, in my view, fairly represent people's ability to pay. And so then what is our prerogative as council? When you buy a property or get a rental and set up your expenses, you go, what is my increase going to be next year, and how am I going to manage my budget to afford that? And I think it is a fair deal to say to people, we're going to give you a little bit of relief, your rates will be relatively level, plus our 4% or 3.9, who ends up being increased this year, rather than giving people who've just had a 40% or so increase in the last 2 years another 15 or 20. I think we've moved far enough. I think it's a worthy question to ask the community, would they like a 50-50 split? And actually, I will vote next time the LTP, if this gets across the line, to consult the community on 50-50, because I think it's a valid question to ask. But please, councillors, we've moved pretty much to where what we consulted on originally. The majority of submitters supported this. They either supported staying at full LV or going to an LV-CV hybrid, around 60%, or 65%. It was only about 34, 35 that supported going further. So I believe we have consulted the community. I believe this is fairer, and I think we just need to take a breather, and then we can look at it again in a full consultative process next year. So I hope you support.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I have consistently supported the move to capital value, as I do believe it's a fairer system, and that fundamentally hasn't changed. However, the cumulative effect of high rates increase at the same time as moving to capital value is something, the rate of change is something that I'm increasingly uncomfortable with, and particularly some in our community have let us know how that's impacted them. Particularly in the commercial space, some of the commercial ratepayers' rates increase has gone, significantly increased at a time where they're really struggling. So I'm going to be supporting this this recommendation. I think, if we had been able to deliver 3 years of lower rates increase at the same time as moving that change, making that change, then I would be comfortable to continue now. But to pause for a year and consider it and perhaps consult again, I think is timely and appropriate given the current environment. So appreciate this being put on the table.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Well, it won't come as any surprise to anyone that I don't support this recommendation. I do have a preference for us moving completely to capital value rather than the hybrid system. And I certainly don't think that we should be taking a step back at this point. When we talked about moving from land value to capital value, the advice we got was that it was better to be done within the space of a long-term plan cycle, and that doing it over long-term plan cycles would complicate the matter. And that was based on what had happened with other councils, I think Hamilton and some others. The question of who's better off is always a tricky one, because in any change of system like this, there are winners and losers. But 71% of non-residential ratepayers are better off under the capital value system, or were better off under the capital value system in 2025. 71% of non-residential ratepayers, 59% of single unit residential ratepayers, and 57% of multi-unit residential ratepayers. And often, and we had some very strong submissions, particularly from BID, who supplemented their submission time with individual sessions with many around this table to make sure that we understood their points, have suggested that it's somehow disadvantageous to businesses to have any of the rate on capital value, let alone the 50-50 split that we were planning to have this year. And as counter evidence to that opinion, I would suggest that you look at the fact that 71% of non-residential ratepayers are better off under a capital value system. Having a capital value system or a hybrid system, that as we have, did not prevent Safari from coming and doing a major development in our CBD, did not prevent the sale of the plaza. And so some of the catastrophising that we hear from certain sections of the business community is not correct and has not come to pass. I have often considered that it's a little ironic that Wellington is going the other way to us. But I think we're not comparing apples with apples. Wellington, in terms of their rating system, isn't the same as ours. We have got other things in our system in terms of the proportion of rates that are paid by residential versus commercial, and the differentials that we use to try and iron out some of the inequities. So I don't think it's fair to compare the two systems, but I have some sympathy for those who superficially look at it and think, well, you're going this way and they're going the other way. The majority of metropolitan councils and cities in New Zealand have a capital value rating system. Full capital value, actually, not the hybrid. So I'm not going to support this. I think we signalled that this was the way we were going 3 years ago. I think people expect consistency, at least. And we can always look at it again and consult on it again for the next long-term plan. But I don't think a change at this point is appropriate. Thank you.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. On the back of Councillor Johnson's comments, because I'm not going to support the hold on the shift that we decided strategically at the last long-term plan to move to 50-50 over a 3-year period. I thought that was debated at length. I thought we consulted far and wide. I think strategically it's fair. I think strategically it's clear. And if you made a vote to support it moving in any one of those years that we've done previously, the argument and rationale has not changed. Why would you not move the 3rd year to get to the 50-50? I actually think 50-50 is a fair place to pause, and that will be after next year for our long-term plan. It takes the best of each land or capital value system, and we live with the worst of each in a fair kind of balance. And so, yeah, we have got a much lower rate increase this year, Councillor Naylor. I take your points of previous years, but I can't see how that argument gives a weight overriding what we've already given a clear steer to. So I'm going to oppose the change here that this recommendation proposes and give you the clear and fair steer strategically, that'll be better to keep this journey going. Thank you.
Councillor Harper.
Thank you. I will be supporting it. That's why I seconded it. But I do agree with what Councillor Naylor said. We have heard from parts of the commercial sector, and we've heard from people that are living with land, and they're finding it hard to pay rates because of this way that it has been set up. So I do think that it is a harder system to navigate through. So I do think that we've got to look at some way of trying to support them through our rating system. So I think what the mover has put up is a way to support them. So that's why we will be supporting them through this recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Kuru.
Land value is one of the clearest and most transparent methods of rating we have. You live in an area, the surrounding land has a recognised value, and your rates are based on that. There is very little ambiguity, very little manipulation. It is simple, consistent, and easy to understand. Land value is not something any one homeowner creates. The value of land comes from the infrastructure around it, the services provided, the desirability of the area, and the collective investment of the whole community. Roads, parks, school, transport, links, all of these lift land value. Improvement value contributes to capital value. Improvement is when many people spend years, even decades, improving their properties. They invest their time, their money, and their effort to make their homes better. Under a capital-based system, those improvements directly increase what they are charged. The more you invest in your home, the more you pay. The better they make their home, the more they are charged. It doesn't make their land value or their neighbourhood more desirable. You just have a nice house in a bad street. Capital values can fluctuate significantly over time. This means rates can become less predictable, placing additional financial stress on households already managing tight budgets. For vulnerable families, that uncertainty can make it even harder to plan and stay secure. Now, there are questions about who is affected. I've heard it thrown around that lower socioeconomic group areas are better off. But how I see them affected are their lower socioeconomic areas have typically lower land values, which means they have a lower rating burden with a land-based rating system. That supports affordability where it is needed most, even for those who have worked hard to improve their homes in these areas. They are not being penalised through higher rates simply because they have made improvements. Rural residents are affected. They are those who pay for services they don't receive. Rubbish collection, bus services, for example. They pay water metering and extra petrol and are hugely affected by the increase. But we need to ask who benefits most from moving away from land rating value. I've had a good look at the map, and I had a look with Brent, and I was thinking, maybe I've got it wrong. But the places I can see in the colours, the places that have the big benefit are from people living in affluent areas, that is those holding large or underutilised sections in high value areas. Those that have land value that grows at much faster rates than those living in lower socioeconomic areas. Highbury is not better off. Rothland is not better off. I had a look. Rural people are not better off, and those that are better off are people living in more preferable areas. Fairness means recognising ability to pay, not just theoretical wealth on paper. And in my opinion, it needs to stay as close to land value rating as possible, so I will support the motion.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, colleagues. If there was a surprise the day before the debate, it was this one coming in, to be quite honest, because I, as some others, had seen this as very much a settled matter, where we had spent a number of years working to even bring reports to the table that would actually enable us to consult with the community, and a very in-depth consultation that led to the decision taken several years ago to slowly move toward a 50-50 hybrid. And I see good value in holding faith with the community on that decision. I think these kind of changes without some signal to the community are the sorts of things that are corrosive of public trust. So I wouldn't be supporting this coming in at this stage. I think it's very appropriate that in a year's time, through the next LTP, there is some reflection. I would acknowledge that there have been some, to my mind, unforeseen consequences of the decision that we made, though. We didn't at the time know that in the revaluation cycle, the lifestyle blocks would retain substantially more value than the urban blocks. And what that's done is drive up, yes, some very, very high numbers in those blocks, but the way to address that fairly and reasonably would be to talk about the differentials and look at that whole unit rather than take something that is actually a fairly narrow slice of the community, about a couple thousand blocks, and use that to offset what is otherwise a good system that is delivering benefit. As Councillor Johnson said, over 70% of businesses better off, 59% of households better off. I do find myself agreeing with the mover that, you know, asset value is not a perfect way of figuring out ability to pay, but I don't think that we should let its imperfections stand in the way. We can't just set the perfect up as the enemy of the good. There is no better system, and so we use what we can, which is the valuations that are there. I would just correct part of Councillor Cooter's commentary. The data that we have to hand is very clear that LV land value is much more volatile in our community than capital value is, and that was actually one of the strongest drivers for bringing this system in, is that it was actually much more predictable and ironed out quite a bit of the up and down that was there in the land value system. So in summary, Mr. Mayor, I do see clear issues here around process, a proposal that would create more losers than winners, and that would overall load more costs into lower socioeconomic households. I see it as a breach of trust in terms of the multi-stage transition that was well considered, and so I won't be supporting this recommendation.
Councillor Ballin.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to make that point as well, that we were making this decision off the back of that property bubble where land values were very highly inflated because land was scarce and the LVs were sky high, and then the valuations were done at the peak of that time, which is really unfortunate, and that one of the key attractors of moving towards this hybrid model was being able to protect against that volatility somewhat, although, as has been mentioned, not perfectly. And I think the point's been made that neither system really fairly assesses ability to pay, so I would argue that 50-50 balances that. Neither are perfect. 50-50 evens out that balance. I think it's been commented by Councillor Wood that there has been a lot of change as we've moved towards this, and that a pause would be fair. And so my question there is, it's fair for who? Because the stats that we've been given, that 71% of single residential units, businesses, the stats have been given to show that substantial numbers are better off. And that's what I have in mind when I'm making this decision, because personally I'm one of the losers. I've had 51% increase in my rates, and that's set to rise larger because we reduced the rural discount and then we reduced the reduction and staged it. But that, you know, I'm right in the midst of all this change, but I have to look at the bigger picture here. And go that 50-50 is a fair balance between two imperfect systems, and I think the grass is always greener, and that's why you see cities like Wellington going, it's crunch time now, maybe we'll go the other way. That was the mindset that we had when we had a property bubble and needed to make some movements, and showed that we were making some movements to try and smooth out that volatility. So I won't be supporting this one. I think we should hold the course and do what we intended to do and get to that 50-50 point. Thank you.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise to vote against this. And the reason I understand the sentiment expressed by the mover and the seconder, but when this came about, I think it was 2023 or thereabouts, I was actually in favour of a hybrid model because I felt like Councillor Bellin highlighted, that 50-50 was the best outcome of two imperfect systems. And the reason why I supported the 50-50 or the hybrid model was simply because of the improved fairness, because when we receive a lot of submissions around the rates review, fairness was the key word that was highlighted amongst all the submissions. And I understand it's a very subjective word and it can mean anything to anyone in terms of their ability to pay. But improved fairness and equity was largely at the heart of the debate. And I believe that by balancing land value and also capital value, 50-50 on each, enables the councils to better reflect a property's true value and its benefit from local services by ensuring ratepayers contribute their fair share. Personally, that's what I believe. And also, a hybrid model, actually, in my opinion, offers a balanced approach to funding local services. It is designed to make it fairer and more sustainable than relying on a single method, either land or capital. And if we are looking to manage the competing demands of fairness, revenue stability, and economic growth, I believe a hybrid model or 50-50 is the best way to go forward. And one of the reasons why I'm actually in favor of the split, or the 50-50 split, is also around the reduced rates shock that we're likely to experience should we remain with a land value, as we've done in the past, and we've had a lot of submissions around that as well. And I believe that a hybrid model helps moderate rates on high land value properties, preventing excessive spikes for specific landowners. And another reason why I'm supporting the 50-50 split, or for us to continue with that, is around the flexibility and also balancing interests. This model, a hybrid model, allows the council to balance the impact on different sectors, such as rural, commercial, and residential properties. It can also protect major businesses from large increases while still encouraging growth. I did a bit of research as this debate was going on, and we have 67 territorial authorities across the country. This translates to about 45 councils using capital value, and about 20 to 20 councils using land value, and then the rest a hybrid model. Now, coming back to the argument that was put forward around Wellington, or whether we should compare ourselves to Wellington or taking examples from Wellington, I don't believe that this necessarily applies in the context of Palmerston North. It's completely different. And while I acknowledge that the bid has expressed some concerns around direct investment into a city if we are to move completely to a 50-50 split or a capital rating system, I don't share that sentiment, because it says here, 65% to 71% of councils in the country use capital and land value, or capital value as a rating system, and that has not diminished investment in those cities. Take Hamilton as a city, for city council as a city. We still see a high rate of investment in those cities. Take Tauranga as an example as well. We still see a high level of investment in those cities. If we want to compare apples with apples, we need to compare as well ourselves with cities that are similar size as us, or who are also have similar systems or rating system as us, in order to identify any differences in that regard. So I'll be supporting for us to continue with the 50-50 split, as we consulted on in the long-term plan about 2 years ago, because that's the confidence that we've given to the community, and we need to maintain that consistency. And that's the reason why I'll be voting against the recommendation before us and retaining the 50-50 split. Thank you.
Councillor Wood, right a reply.
Fairer to who? That is the best question of this debate. Thank you, Councillor Zabellin, because you're quite right. That is the question we need to answer throughout. This is a philosophical debate. Who are we being fair to? I want to be really clear, councillors. My argument is that to the 89,000 people who don't watch the council videos, don't read the consultation document, don't check what their rate's going to be, the only time they know what their rate increase is when they get the bill in the mail. And so to those people, when they're planning their budgets, they go, what do I expect my rate's going to be next year? About the same as they were this year, plus a little bit. And it's those people, when I think almost all councillors, bar a few, have said, this is the worst of both worlds as a system. Neither system's perfect. Neither system's particularly fair. Neither system's a particularly good determinant. It's not what everybody said, but a lot of councillors agreed that this system would be the worst or the best of both worlds. And so if your fundamental belief is capital nor land are a particularly good metric, then I would tell you, councillors, or encourage you to believe that the fairest thing we can do is be predictable. The fairest thing we can do is not have large spikes and large shocks for people who aren't expecting it. I do think, when Councillor Dennison, said that we consulted far and wide, we did consult far and wide on a 70-30 split, was our preferred option as a council. When Councillor Barrett said, we shouldn't make changes without signalling from the community, it was Councillor Barrett who put up that we go to 50-50, which wasn't an option that we consulted the community on. You had the right to do that, sure. Just as I believe I've got the right to do this, is that absolutely we can discuss changes that aren't exactly what we consulted on, and I think I'm surprised by your surprise, because this has been my consistent position the whole way through, that we should land at 70-30. To councillors who are feeling guilt that, well, I voted 50-50, therefore I have to stick to it, I really strongly encourage you, you don't. We have had new information. We have seen with our own eyes the implications of this system. It is really hard to understand the full swathe of impacts of something when you've got 16 different models telling you different things that we got in the lead up to it. And I have absolute respect for the councillors that voted for it. I understand your reasons why. Please do not view that as a reason you can't vote for this. We've now seen the impacts, coupled with cost of living changes, coupled with revaluations, coupled with differential changes. The reason, and Councillor Johnson is quite right, the suggestion was you shouldn't do this over 10 years, is because there are a lot of complicating factors that go into a rating system. And so my suggestion isn't that we extend the transition from 33 to 50 for another 3 years. That's not what I'm saying, and move it, 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7% a year, whatever. My suggestion is we fix at the point we're at for a year, take a breather, give our community a break and some predictability, and then we can consult as a part of the long-term plan on a 50-50 system or a full capital system. So I would encourage you, councillors, please. We've seen the impacts for people who have had 20% rises year after year. Let's give them some predictability. Rates are going up around 3.9%, assuming we all vote for that. So let's give them some predictability so that they know what's coming. I think that, in an imperfect system, is the fairest thing that we can do.
All right, councillors, 2D is what we'll be voting on. Eight all. So, unfortunately, it's failed for lack of majority. Okay. We've got two more. So, the other additional recommendations there is, again, from Councillor Wood, and this is around the Chief Executive to provide greater oversight of overhead allocation to council as part of the 27-37 LTP process by 1. Identifying overhead allocation as a dedicated expense line in each activity of council, and 2. Bringing a paper to council outlining activity areas and costs proposed to be included in the overhead allocation for approval by council prior to the LTP budget being consulted on. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, colleagues. I'm quite clear on what this does through the recommendations. I haven't even speech notes. I think the first thing this does is help deal with the issue that comes up time and time again in council, where we go through a workshop or through an item or through something else, where we get told, for example, Keisha Birch is costing us almost $1 million a year and losing $800,000 a year. When we say, okay, well, why is that when it was losing 80 grand 5 years ago? Oh, no, councillors, that's overheads. That's all overheads, don't worry about it. That's just been allocated into the project. When we look at social housing, when we look at any of our other activities, all I'm asking is that when we get this report, and we have activity lines in here of different areas of council, that rather than just having a broad expense line, the overheads are separated out so that we have visibility over them. And I do believe it's entirely possible. Every time we ask the finance team, what is the overhead component, they can give us that figure. So it's not hidden. We've had from our team the calculation of that. We had that report that came through from Scott, goodness, a couple of months ago. So all we're asking for is transparency over that, because whatever side of the argument you're on, if you want to see more investment in a service, but it already looks like it's outrageously expensive because half of it's overheads, well then that weakens your argument. If you want to see a reduction in the service, but when you get to the chamber, the officers go, well actually most of that's overheads anyway, it's not real expenditure, councillors, it's just this amorphous expenditure. This is in everybody's interests, and I think we're going to keep having the same issue where we don't understand what the overhead component is of our activities if we don't ask for it. And I would have loved to have had this in the annual budget, but I think it is good process for us to signal now for the LTP budgets. We'd like to see that outlined. It's also helpful to members of the community when they look at an expense line and go, oh my God, particular activity X costs a huge amount of money, get rid of it. when actually they're not aware that if you were to get rid of it, you might only save a portion of that and not the true cost. So I think it's better for transparency with councillors, I think it's better for transparency with the community, and I think it will save us a whole lot of headaches and difficulty going through. I appreciate it's frustrating for officers and that it's going to require some reworking, and I apologise to our poor finance team for that, but I think it needs to happen. And on number 2, on bringing a paper to council outlining the activity areas and costs proposed, I think we need to have ownership of this space, councillors. There has never been a vote while I've been here of here's the items that we include in overheads and then put across the entire organisation. We've seen the paper with them outlined. There's things like cafeteria that get put across all activities when actually the staff member working at the Resource Recovery Centre might not be up at CAB using the cafeteria. There's things like security that are applied equally across all activities. I'm not predetermining those areas we might want to separate out. What I am saying is I'm interested, and I hope councillors will be interested in seeing what are the activities proposed in overheads, and then are we happy with that? Because it also means that when we get through and we go to complain about overheads, we can go, no, that was your decision, councillors. You've seen it, you've had the information, you've made a call, and you've set the assumptions for the LTP. And I think that is a useful thing for us to do. So I hope this isn't hugely controversial and that we can support this.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. It's tradition in any debate that Councillor Wood and I are on opposite sides, but from time to time we do like to come together to put something forward. And this is one of those occasions where, you know, we've both had frustration recently over understanding overhead allocations and when they're in a budget line and when they're not in a budget line. And, you know, I'll acknowledge that we're likely to be on different sides of the argument once the information is in front of us. But nevertheless, it's important that we understand, all of us, what the overheads are, how they're calculated, where they're applied, because it does affect our decisions around, you know, whether or not an activity continues to be a council in-house activity, whether or not we might outsource that activity. So, for example, if activity A appears to be, in the language of some councillors, losing $1 million a year, but then we determined that when the overheads are put to us that actually their overheads are 1.5 million, then outsourcing that activity or stopping doing it altogether will not save any money. In fact, you know, the vast majority of those overheads, not all I can see, but the vast majority, are likely to have to be redistributed over other areas of council activity. So what would appear on the face of it to be a jolly good idea may actually, in fact, be a waste of everybody's time. So I would suggest that this will be very useful for future decision making. And as Councillor Wood said, it doesn't matter what side of the argument you sit on, more information is good. Thank you.
Okay. You don't need a right of reply. Okay, we're going to vote on 3, please. And it's passed, 15 votes for and none against. All right, I think we're in our last one. Fantastic. Oh, no, looks like we might have something else at the end. Now, this one is really to give some direction and form the policy, the expenses policy that will come up in a future meeting. Look, it's been highly politicised recently, and I agree there is some public perception out there. And look, the cost in the budget to this council has been quite low, but this recommendation will remove it, will make that even less. I tried to get a bit of a handle on what was happening around the country, so I rang a number of my fellow mayors in different parts of the sector, from metros, provincial cities, rural, to gauge what they all do. And it was all different. So it didn't really help in some way. I suppose there was probably more of a view that removing the reimbursement or restricting the alcohol for elected members was probably a stronger thing. they all had different views and some quite strong around events and council events. Some had got rid of it and found that their council events, 20 people turned up and they had 300 turn up previously. So we looked at other options there, and with the seconder we looked at what I think Auckland Council do this, and it for instance, a civic awards, you're giving the highest honour to somebody in the land, but you are giving them a welcome drink as they walk in the door. So it was deemed fair and reasonable rather than just doing nothing. And other volunteer awards, those sorts of things. So I think it's deemed as fair and reasonable, and it'll have to be voted on, obviously, within the policy, but it sort of gives some direction. So that's where it's a starting point. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of questions, if I might. Firstly, just to understand the intent here, would that be landing this so that it's effective within annual budget 27, or what's the time frame on this?
Well, we vote on policy next meeting.
So we would land it for AB 27. Yeah, great. And just the thinking around the removing reimbursement for purchase of alcohol, etc. How does that? What's the thinking there in terms of where it's bundled? Like if you go to a conference and there's a free bottle on the table, are you then unable to claim for that conference cost if you get a Koru Club membership that means that you get access to alcohol in the Koru Club? Like how does that bundling issue get dealt with?
It'll be dealt through the policy, but in essence it was just removing what's there at the moment.
Right, okay,
yeah.
Thanks.
So it's at the moment you can get a drink if you go to with a meal or something like that. At a conference, it just removes that. So if you want it, you can still have a drink, but you pay for it yourself.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you. This is a common sense measure, and it lines us up with Office of the Auditor General expectations. And I have the Office of the Auditor General Controlling Sensitive Expenditure document open in front of me, and on page 19, their expectation is that, it says here, and I read, we expect entertainment and hospitality expenditure to be subject to policies that include a general prohibition on organisations paying for alcohol except in specific circumstances within prescribed limits. So I think this policy brings us clearly to in line where we should be. And so, and obviously Councillor Naylor and I were intending to bring a similar policy, but you've jumped in there and got one, so that's good, and I'm very happy to support it. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for your work in bringing this forward and the work that you've done trying to align us with what's happening across the sector. I don't think it's going to make the front page of the Manual 2 standard if I say I like a drink. I think many of us around the table do. You don't need to write that down, Janine. It's not news. I promise it's not news. I think many of us around the table do. So this isn't signalling a newfound Puritan ideology for Palmerston North City Council. I think those of us who drink responsibly will continue to do so, and those who make other choices will continue to make those choices. This is about aligning our governance and management policies with external guidance, as pointed out, and also, I think, reflecting a change we're hearing in our community voice. And you only have to look at the feedback we're receiving in our community to licensing applications to know that there is just a shift in the public discourse around the perception of harm in our community, and a reality that we fulfill a leadership position in our community, and this is an area where we can lead by example, and that has some good follow-on implications for our budgets as well, I hope. So recognising that it's not enough just to say elected members won't seek reimbursement or won't be able to seek reimbursement, but that also flows through into our staff expectations, which also aligns with public sector expectations outside the local government part of that as well. So I'm very confident this does not overly restrict my ability to have a good time, or any of yours, but does respond to the community voice there.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. As Councillor Fitzgerald already mentioned, I had a similar motion submitted on Tuesday, along with the other recommendations that went a little bit further than this. It went further in terms of removing alcohol, the supply of alcohol at events. We had submissions from the Cancer Societies and other submitters who actually highlighted the health issues with alcohol as well. And I really found that quite interesting because we have health policies such as shade policies, smoke-free, CBD, other policies where we recognise there is a health impact. Yet we, for some reason, you know, we've had a number of these debates. There's quite a few times I've proposed at this table to reduce the provision of alcohol, and that's been vehemently opposed by the mover and seconder of this one. But the health reasons alone, I would have been happy to go further than this, but in light of the mover and the seconder actually trying to get this part way towards in the right direction, I will support it for three main reasons. The health ones that I've also just mentioned. The second one, I think there's a reputational issue here because when there is not limitations around the policies, there's the potential for use to be abused or overused. And I think that sometimes the community might even presume that that's happening beyond what it's happening, or perhaps they witness behaviour which causes them to have concerns around that. So for that reason, I think, and particularly the email that we got from the Office of the Auditor General on the 2nd of March really was quite clear in outlining their expectations around that. So the third is cost, whereas it's quite a minor aspect, but it is there, and I think there possibly could be corresponding other costs saved, such as taxis, etc., as a result of this. So I will support it, saying that it probably doesn't go quite as far as what I would have liked, but I will support it.
All right, thank you, colleagues. Look, just in response, I mean, there is some restrictions on our current policy, so that's already in place, Councillor. But you are right, there will be some reductions. I think there was a question asked, somebody put it up, around how much was spent in total from the organisation, including staff, and I think it was around 11,500, 12,000. And that wasn't drunk by one person, that was drunk by the organisation and thousands of people that come. So, look, this is fair and reasonable. It keeps our events alive and being a good host, but also respecting perception and I suppose just coming in line with the Auditor General. I would have to say other councils do quite different things too. So there is quite a mixed view out there. So anyway, this brings us into giving some direction to those policies, which come to us, I think, in a month's time, and it'll just give us clear direction then. Okay, we'll vote. Has passed 15 votes for and none against. Do we need to catch all? Right. Okay. All right, well, thank you, colleagues. We are finished. I'll just ask the Deputy Mayor if she'd formally close deliberations, and just want to acknowledge not only my colleagues, but the staff and the CE and the team that have done the good work. There'll be still a little bit to come back to us, but we're in a reasonable space, and thank you, everybody. To the Deputy Mayor.
Tēnā koe, Your Worship, ngā mihi. Ko te pai a tātou mahi I tēnei wā, our work is finished for the moment. Hoki pai atu ki o koutou kāinga, return safely home ki tō mahi, ake to your other work, ki te hāpori, to the community, ki tō whānau, and to your family. Noho haumaru mai I roto I ngā manaakitanga katoa. Stay safe, stay well, and blessings to everyone. Haumie, hui e, tae ki.